Introduction: the primordial void and the illusion of solidity. In the fundamental architecture of the cosmos, the whole of humanity has been enslaved by an optical and tactile hallucination so persuasive that it has dictated the tragic fate of billions of minds: the illusion of solidity. The ordinary individual, whom in this thermodynamic treatise we shall call the inert particle, is lost. The inert particle, or the passive observer, has been indoctrinated to believe that the physical world is a hard, fixed, hostile, and immovable environment. Human beings touch steel, observe financial institutions, feel the suffocating weight of scarcity, and their analog brains conclude they are surrounded by impenetrable walls. They believe they must crash, sweat, and bleed against these walls just to survive. This is the most devastating and paralyzing lie of classical physics. Descend to the subatomic level and hard reality collapses immediately. Quantum mechanics has demonstrated with dictatorial mathematical precision that the atom is a vacuum. The atom, the building block of your body, your debts, your enemies, and your empires, is 99.9999% empty space. If you extracted all the empty space from the atoms of the 8 billion inhabitants of planet Earth, the entire solid mass of the human species would fit into the volume of a single sugar cube. It is a mere fragment. What the passive observer perceives as impassable matter is nothing more than a haze of vibratory energy, an ocean of mathematical probabilities fluctuating in what we will call the quantum void or the unified field. There are no real walls in your life. There are only electromagnetic force fields repelling each other in the dark. Human suffering, chronic poverty, and frustration are not the result of a cruel universe. They are the pathetic result of a mind trying to fist-fight a hologram. The inert particle lives terrified by the apparent hardness of this haze. It drifts in a state of uncertainty, letting entropy and the expectations of others rule. The inert particle allows other minds to collapse its reality for it. It believes it dwells within the universe, subject to its economic and social laws, blindly waiting for external circumstances to dictate its destiny. Conscious matter is the detonation order to eradicate that passivity and reclaim the throne of existence. This is not a text of comforting philosophy. It is a manual of particle physics applied to the absolute domination of your own trajectory. Here you will discover the most terrifying, lonely, and majestic secret of the astrophysics of the will. You do not inhabit reality. You are the measuring device that is forcing it to exist. You are the quantum architect. Your focused attention and your icy certainty are the exact force of gravity that forces the wave function of infinite possibilities to collapse. This focus is what solidifies the three-dimensional matter you step on. You are the one who defines the parameters of the local simulation. Breathe the primordial void. Matter is not an obstacle. It is expectant, inert, and completely docile energy. It is waiting for you to assume your position as the singularity and command it, with the mathematical tyranny of your consciousness, what exact form it must take. The field is yours to command. Chapter 1. The Passive Observer and the Superposition of Failure. In the immense, cold, and mathematically perfect architecture of the unified field, the greatest miscalculation of the human psyche has been adopting the mentality of classical physics to solve the problems of a quantum universe. The ordinary individual, whom in this treatise we will classify with clinical contempt as the inert particle or the passive observer, has been indoctrinated under the Newtonian dogma. One has been taught that the universe is a gigantic and deterministic clockwork mechanism where external forces, the economy, luck, government, fate, act upon him, pushing him as if he were a passive billiard ball on a green cloth table. Under the paralyzing hypnosis of this obsolete model, operates the inert particle in its three-dimensional life cycle. Observe the radiography of its operational agony. When the inert particle faces a fork in its destiny, starting a corporate empire, leaving a parasitic relationship, or making a massive capital investment, its nervous system, atrophied by the illusion of fatality, enters a state of analytical paralysis. Instead of issuing a directional order, the individual sits in the waiting room of the cosmos. He utters the phrases that act as thermodynamic death sentences. Let's see what happens. I am waiting for a signal from the universe. If it's meant to be, it will be. I'm going to keep my options open just in case. The inert particle believes the universe is a benevolent and independent entity that is drafting a plan for him. He believes linear time will resolve the dilemma. What this individual ignores, with an astrophysical blindness that condemns him to absolute irrelevance, is that the unified field has no will of its own, has no plans, and above all, lacks the capacity to make decisions. The quantum void is an infinite ocean of energy at rest, a massive server that is literally waiting for a user with administrator privileges to enter a query into the database. When you sit around to wait and see what happens, the universe stops and looks at you with the same cold indifference with which a blank search engine waits for you to type a word. By not defining your objective, by refusing to issue an exact measurement with your will, you condemn your own existence to float in a fog of indeterminacy. To this mathematical tragedy, where human life dissolves into a fan of infinite simultaneous disappointments, we shall call the superposition of failure. The physics, quantum superposition, and the equation of indeterminacy. To dismantle the blasphemy of human passivity and awaken to the creative tyranny of the quantum architect, we must abandon the psychology of fate and dive into the pure mathematics of wave mechanics. We must understand how matter operates before being forced to exist and discover the most mind-blowing, terrifying, and empowering phenomenon of the cosmic fabric, quantum superposition. In the subatomic realm, the invisible substrate that composes 100% of the physical reality you touch, the money you crave, and the body you inhabit, particles do not exist as solid objects with defined positions. Before an observer fixes their attention on them, they exist as probability waves. In the 1920s, physicist Erwin Schrödinger formulated the mathematical equation that describes the behavior of the universe in this spectral state. In its purest and most dictatorial form, the wave equation is expressed as Ijdbari frech PC RT, schlecht ifrek abla supuspu RTT, eit, PPC RT. Do not be intimidated by the syntax of the source code. What this majestic equation dictates is the state of Turipsi Dallas, PC, the wave function. This function contains all dynamic information about the system. But here is the omega-level secret. The wave function does not describe where an electron is. It describes the mathematical probability of finding it in infinite possible places at the same time. As long as the system is not disturbed by an observer, a measurement instrument, the particle is literally in superposition. It exists here, there, in a positive state, in a negative state, rich, poor, victorious, and destroyed, all simultaneously. It is a mathematical ghost, a blurry cloud of maybe. The human inert particle transfers this quantum phenomenon to the macroscopic scale of its own life. When the individual refuses to commit to a singular and absolute decision, for example, when saying, I want to be a millionaire, but I also want the security of my mediocre salary and I don't want to risk my free time, he is forcing the wave function of his destiny to remain in a state of superposition. His reality becomes a blurry cloud. This is the physical and thermodynamic reason why the passive observer feels chronic anxiety. Anxiety is not a psychological disorder. It is the biological agony of a nervous system that is being stretched across infinite probable timelines. You are attempting to inhabit success, failure, humiliation, and glory at the same time, without anchoring to any. And the ecosystem, which operates under the law of entropy, the natural tendency toward chaos, dictates a lethal rule for macroscopic superpositions. If you keep your options open for too long, the probability cloud will not magically collapse into your golden victory. Success probabilities require concentrated energy, syntropy, to materialize. The probability of failure, mediocrity, and poverty requires no energy. Therefore, if you remain passive, the unified field will simply download the option of least energetic resistance, absolute stagnation, the superposition of failure. The financial Schrödinger's cat and the paradox of doubt. The most famous thought experiment in quantum physics, designed by Schrödinger himself, illustrates this paralysis with perfect violence. Imagine a cat locked in an opaque steel box. Beside it, there is a lethal mechanism, a radioactive atom that has a 50% probability of decaying in the next hour. If it decays, it activates a hammer that breaks a vial of poison gas and the cat dies. If it doesn't, the cat lives. According to the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, as long as the box remains closed and no one looks inside, the radioactive atom is in superposition, decayed and not decayed at once. Therefore, the mechanism is both activated and deactivated. And, by macroscopic extension, the cat is alive and dead at the same time. It is only in the exact microsecond in which the observer opens the box and looks that the wave function collapses. The universe is forced to choose a state. The cat jumps out alive or lies dead. The inert particle lives its financial, romantic and professional life with the box hermetically sealed. Faced with a gigantic project, an investment or a vocation, the host prefers the safe ignorance of the closed box. One prefers to fantasize that the millionaire project is possible, but never takes the definitive step, investing the capital, founding the company, burning the ships, because he is terrified of opening the box and finding the corpse of his failure. He lives in the cosmic paradox. In order not to face the death of his illusions, he prefers to keep his financial Schrödinger's cat in a hybrid state of quantum coma. He tells himself, as long as I don't truly try, I haven't failed. The quantum architect looks at this cowardice with clinical and absolute contempt. He knows that a half-alive and half-dead cat cannot hunt. A corporate empire in an idea state generates no income. A relationship kept casual so as not to get hurt does not produce the electromagnetic shield of extreme loyalty. The architect is not afraid of the box. He is the hammer. He walks toward the armored box of quantum uncertainty and kicks it open. He forces the universe to deliver a result. If upon opening the box the cat is dead, the business fails, the architect does not cry. He has extracted the data, he has processed the ATP of failure, as we saw in the biome, buries the corpse, designs a new experiment. He then opens the next box with the same sociopathic coldness. He knows that the only way to guarantee finding a live cat, lethal and roaring, is by opening boxes at a speed that the doubt of the inert particle could never endure. The quantum leap, the architect and the authority of the measuring device. The thermodynamic transmutation from the inert particle to the quantum architect marks the definitive abandonment of hope as a life strategy. The architect assimilates with icy lucidity and mathematical tyranny that the unified field is not a judge evaluating his merits, it is a precision mirror reflecting his level of determination. He repudiates the weight. He understands that if matter is 99.999% fluctuating empty space, he is not subject to matter. Matter is waiting for his instructions. He assumes the execution of quantum sovereignty, the quantum leap, and the authority of the measuring device. To understand the absolute power of the architect, you must understand what observing really means in quantum physics. When physicists perform the double-slit experiment, the most terrifying experiment in modern science, they fire electrons toward a barrier with two slits. If there is no detector measuring which slit the electron passes through, the particle acts as a wave, passing through both slits at the same time and creating an interference pattern on the back wall. The electron behaves like blurry, pure probability. But at the exact instant, physicists place a measuring instrument, a camera to observe exactly which slit the electron passes through, the universe enters mathematical panic. The wave function collapses instantaneously. The electron stops being a probability wave spread through space and becomes a solid, hard and concrete particle passing through only one slit. The simple act of looking with intention altered the nature of physical matter. The quantum architect is the most sophisticated measuring device in the universe. His mind is not a passive receiver of information, it is a reality-collapsing laser. When the architect decides he will dominate an industry, forge a steel body, or accumulate massive capital, he does not issue a wish. A wish is a weak and unfocused wave. He issues a deterministic measurement. He fixes his attention on the final result with a gravitational density so monstrous that the mathematical probabilities of the room change. He eliminates Plan B. He eliminates just in case. In physics, eliminating the second slit of the box forces the electron to pass through the slit you decided. The architect seals all escape doors in his own mind. By doing so, he tells the unified field, there are no open options, there is no superposition, there is only a single timeline authorized to materialize in my spatial vector, and it is the line of absolute domination. The quantum universe, stripped of its alternative roots by the observer's implacable will, has no thermodynamic alternative but to collapse the immense fog of energy into the three-dimensional, dense and bright form the architect has dictated. Matter obeys concentrated attention with the same mathematical submission with which gravity obeys mass. The illusion of time and instant transmission, one of the most destructive breaks keeping the inert particle in its state of superposition, is its submission to the illusion of Newtonian linear time. The passive observer believes his success, his empire, or his healing are far off in the future. He calculates the distance separating him from his goal, and seeing the temporal gap, doubts his capacity to cross it. And by doubting, he returns the wave function to the blurry cloud state. The quantum architect must eradicate this linear perception from his motherboard. In quantum field theory, time is not a river flowing relentlessly from past to future. Space-time is a unified block of information. All possible configurations of matter, you broke today, you a billionaire in 10 years, you as the absolute monarch of your lineage, exist simultaneously as potentials in the unified field. When you issue a deterministic measurement, an irrevocable decision of success, you are not sending a message that will take 10 years to reach the universe. You are executing an instant transmission. At the subatomic level, your consciousness collapses the probability in the now. The variable has already been altered in the back end of reality. The fact that in the three-dimensional front end, the physical screen, rendering time is required for atoms to arrange themselves, contracts to be signed, companies to grow, muscles to hypertrophy, is simply the friction of space-time, the lag of the simulation. But the architect knows the collapse has already occurred. Therefore, he does not walk toward the future hoping to achieve something. He walks inhabiting the hologram of victory already assured. This unmovable certainty is the thermal signature that keeps the wave function collapsed. If the architect were to doubt for a single second because of temporal impatience, he would lift his gaze from the measuring instrument, the camera would turn off, and physical matter would instantly dissolve back into the blurry haze of mediocrity. The calibration, the forced collapse protocol, and the singularity of focus. To eradicate the passive observer condition from your neural circuits and forge the collapsing authority of a quantum architect, you must install a regime of dictatorial intolerance toward ambiguity in your own life today. You have to stop treating your dreams as diffuse possibilities and start treating them as unnegotiable GPS coordinates. The process demands a direct mathematical intervention in your behavior and the execution of forced collapse. Step 1. The annihilation of Plan B, closing the double slit. The nature of the unified field is lazy. If you give the universe an easy way out, a Plan B, energy will flow there because it requires less negentropic concentration. You must execute the tactical annihilation of your lifelines. If your Plan A is founding an empire that devours the market, and your Plan B is keeping this resume updated just in case I have to become an employee again, your wave function is divided. You are measuring both slits and creating destructive interference. Burn the resume. Destroy the thermal escape route. Force your limbic brain to operate under the all-or-nothing directive. When the mind knows biologically that there is no quantum safety net, it secretes the neurochemistry of absolute genius and collapses reality into the only slit available, survival through victory. Step 2. The act of measurement, irreversible commitment. You cannot collapse the probability wave sitting on your sofa meditating passively. Meditation is the design of the blueprint. Collapse requires the insertion of energy into the three-dimensional world. The act of measurement is irreversible economic and physical commitment. If you decide to mutate your physique, collapse doesn't happen when you join the gym. It happens when you lift the bar until the fiber tears. If you decide to launch a business, Wave function collapse occurs in the microsecond you sign a contract, transfer a massive payment to a supplier, or publicly announce the launch date without the product. You put matter against the ropes. You inject capital, energy, or reputation into the void. By making this physical move, your status changes from inert particle that thinks to measuring device that acts. The universe detects the alteration in mass and is forced to solidify the bridge under your feet as you take the leap into the void. Step 3. Sustaining the observation. Immunity to decoherence. The fatal error of the metaphysical amateur is that he manages to collapse the probability on Monday, but on Wednesday, not seeing the physical empire fully assembled, he doubts. He cries. He complains that quantum physics doesn't work. In physics, when a system loses its defined state by interacting with environment static, it is called decoherence. Your doubt is the decoherence of your own empire. To avoid it, you must sustain a sociopathic gaze on the objective. You become deaf to the temporal evidence of the physical world. If your bank account marks zeros today, you observe it with the coldness of an astrophysicist looking at a residual error on the monitor. You know it is old information. You refuse to withdraw attention from the final coordinate. The unwavering persistence of your focus is the electromagnet that keeps the atoms of your new reality cohere. It keeps them together until the three-dimensional screen finishes loading the render. To reclaim your throne at the command center of the unified field, you must murder the chronic waiter, the spiritual dilettante, and the eternal indecisive that parasitizes your prefrontal cortex today. Renounce the false humility of believing you do not have the right to demand that matter bend. Matter has no opinions, it only has mass and probability. And probability always kneels before absolute concentration. Next time you face the abyss of uncertainty, next time you feel the paralyzing terror of taking an irrevocable decision and feel the herbivore instinct to let time resolve it, stop the fluctuation of your thoughts. Immobilize your psyche. Lower your brain frequency to electromagnetic absolute zero. Open the eyes of your will with the lethal precision of an industrial laser. Aim your measurement directly at the skull of your wildest ambition. Understand that the walls, obstacles, and distances separating you from your glory are only holographic mist waiting for your command to dissipate. When you learn to look at reality not as a brick wall, but as a mathematical ocean of possibilities begging for the dictatorship of your attention, you will cease to be a castaway blindly bouncing against quantum foam. You will have transmuted, by the unappealable right of wave collapse, into the quantum architect, the focused singularity for whom uncertainty does not exist. There only exists the obedient abyss, which solidifies instantly into golden steps in the exact fraction of a second in which you decide to step down. Chapter 2. Wave Function Collapse, the Observer Effect. In the vast and icy structure of the unified field, human suffering is neither divine punishment nor a statistical error. It is, strictly speaking, a pathological failure in the measurement process. The ordinary individual, the entity we define as the inert particle or passive observer, has been inoculated with a conceptual virus. This virus destroys the capacity to alter space-time. Society and slave morality have baptized this virus with a poetic and harmless name: hope. Human beings have been taught that desiring something very strongly, praying for a better future, or having faith that circumstances will change is the sacred mechanism for attracting success. We shall call this operative tragedy, where the mind spends immense amounts of thermal energy without moving a single electron in its favor, the stagnation of hope or the quantum beggar syndrome. Observe the X-ray of this thermodynamic impotence. The inert particle visualizes a financial empire or the healing of a lethal disease. He reads books on manifestation, closes his eyes for 20 minutes a day, and ardently desires that matter will bend. But in the exact instant he opens his physical eyes and returns to the 3D screen of the world, his behavior collapses into misery. He checks his bank account and feels terror. He looks at his surroundings and pities himself. He acts, walks, and breathes from the absolute premise that he hasn't made it yet. The inert particle operates under the duality of the beggar. On one hand, he pleads with the quantum void for wealth. On the other, he behaves like a frightened slave. He ignores the astrophysical truth that costs him his entire sovereignty. The unified field is deaf to poetry, hope, and suffering. The primordial void does not understand tears. It is a pure mathematical matrix operating under a single, unbreakable law. The universe does not deliver what you desire. The universe renders the exact state you are observing in the present with absolute mathematical tyranny. When you hope for something to happen in the future, you are emitting a lethal quantum measurement. You are confirming that in the now, you do not have it. You are measuring scarcity. Since the act of measuring forces matter to solidify, the field obeys with terrifying fidelity. It collapses the wave function and crystallizes scarcity. The physics, the observer effect, and the tyranny of the eigenstate. To dismantle the blasphemy of passive hope and awaken to the clinical omnipotence of the quantum architect, we must abandon cheap mysticism and descend to the laboratories of particle physics. We must understand the exact mechanics of material creation and the observer effect and the collapse of the wave function. In quantum mechanics, matter does not exist as a solid fact until it hits consciousness. Before observation, a quantum system, whether a photon, an electron, or your entire financial future, exists in a superposition of all possible states. Mathematically, this is described by a state vector, denoted by Tauche psi angle, ket psi. This vector resides in a multidimensional Hilbert space. The equation of total probability dictates that the quantum state is a linear sum of multiple potential realities. Dans m psi angle, your C1 a pi 1 angle, plus C2 on a pi 2 angle, plus C3 a pi 3 angle, p was, plus Cn a pi angle. In this equation, the states Charchapine angle dollars represent all possibilities. You in absolute bankruptcy. Pi wing tan in waren angle dollar. You in the frightened middle class. Item pi na 2 angle dollar. Or you as the untouchable monarch of your industry. Item pi 3 angle dollar. The coefficients secants are complex numbers. Their magnitude squared determines the exact probability that the universe will materialize that particular state. This is the vibratory haze, but the haze cannot interact with the 3D world. For an event to occur in your life, the quantum state must stop being an infinite sum of probabilities and must collapse into a single concrete, solid, and irreversible state. What forces this collapse? The act of measurement, the observer effect. When physicists perform experiments like the double slit, they prove that introducing a detector, an observer, forces the particle to abandon its wave state and behave like a piece of hard matter. The quantum universe is extremely shy in its infinite state, but highly obedient before the tyranny of an observation lens. In von Neumann's mathematical formulation, when an observation is made, the system jumps instantly and violently from the probabilistic state 1 sas a psi angle dollars to one specific base state, called the eigenstate. Here lies the omega-level secret. Your conscious mind and focused attention are the most massive measurement instruments. The quantum architect understands he is not separate from the experiment. He is the detector. When the inert particle looks at his bank account and feels terror, he is acting as a detector calibrated to measure the state psi 1 angle of poverty. The universe reads that emotional measurement and crystallizes the eigenstate. The universe does not punish you. The field simply collapses reality upon the exact value your psychological measurement instrument is calibrated to read. The entropy of doubt and the double measurement. To master matter, you must understand why 99% of attempts to alter reality fail. The failure is not in quantum physics. It is in the interference of the instrument. The inert particle tries to collapse the probability of wealth. For 10 minutes a day, his instrument points to the state of success. Ribo phi3 angle. In that brief quantum instant, the wave function begins to collapse toward the empire. The electrons of the universe begin the dance of reorganization to bring capital and opportunities to his door. But then, the individual goes out. He receives a bill. He hits an obstacle, and herbivore terror seizes his nervous system. In that second millisecond, the inert particle looks at the outside world again and emits a second measurement. He tells himself, "This isn't working. I knew it was too good to be true." By emitting this doubt, the individual has generated an inverted quantum Zeno effect. He has introduced a new act of observation. This new measurement erases the previous collapse. The quantum universe intercepts this fear-based measurement. The system reads that the operator demands to measure the state of failure. The field stops the compilation of the empire and re-renders 3D misery. Doubt is not just an annoying emotional state. It is a command. In particle physics applied to reality creation, doubt is a cancel command executed by a system administrator. Every time you check the physical world looking for proof and get frustrated, you are performing a faulty measurement. You are opening the thermal oven before the metal solidifies, letting the cold ruin the alloy. The quantum architect knows he cannot afford the biological luxury of doubt. Doubt is a thermodynamic leak, a destructive interference that scatters the energy of wave collapse. To force matter to obey, the architect must develop absolute perceptual arrogance, the ability to maintain the instrument locked in that eigenstate. The quantum leap, execution of the eigenstate and falsification of reality. The transmutation from passive observer to quantum architect marks the clinical death of hope and the birth of the dictatorship of attention. The architect assimilates that the outside world is simply a low-resolution monitor showing results of past measurements. He repudiates the habit of reacting to the screen. He understands that if he wants to change the movie, he must not scratch the monitor. He must go to the back end and alter the observation lens. He assumes the execution of the quantum leap, the assumption of the eigenstate, and the voluntary falsification of reality. This does not require muscle, it requires mental control. Imagine the quantum architect facing a new challenge. He has decided to conquer a market or heal his biology. The analog ego of the inert particle would try to plan every step, burdened by the how. The architect stops the linear motor. He executes the first protocol of quantum collapse, the annihilation of the timeline. He knows that in the unified field, past and future do not exist. All coordinates coexist in the void. Therefore, the architect does not wish to become a monarch in 5 years. Wishing is establishing the measurement in the current lack variable. He assumes the eigenstate of the consummated conquest. In the darkness of his mind, he adjusts the quantum tuner. He isolates himself from 3D sensory stimuli. He searches the field for the exact state vector where the battle has already been won and the money already rests in his massive vaults. Instead of looking at that state from afar, the architect enters it. He wears his mind with the skin of that final result. He begins to feel and breathe from that state. How does the monarch who has already conquered the biome react to criticism? He reacts with sublime boredom and dominant peace. He injects that exact emotional chemistry into his bloodstream here and now. He is executing an act of reality falsification. His biological body cannot distinguish between a materialized event and one measured with absolute certainty in the mind. The brain releases the neurochemistry of triumph. By establishing this thermal signature, the architect has just emitted the master measurement. The observation instrument has locked onto coordinate $phin angle $. The wave function collapses. The universe feels the gravitational lash of this decision. But the architect knows the latency of 3D matter. He knows the miracle has solidified at the quantum level, but the physical atoms require rendering time. Here enters the second protocol, life in the collapsed state, observer arrogance. The architect opens his eyes. The outside world still shows a low bank balance or physical barriers. This is where the inert particle panics and undoes the collapse. The quantum architect observes these proofs with a cold smile. He knows what his physical eyes see is only fossil light. It is the luminous trail of his old vibratory state, a late render of old measurements. He refuses to accept the outside world as his authority. He walks through 3D reality operating exclusively from the eigenstate of success already consummated. He interacts with debts with the attitude of a tycoon amused by an accounting error. By maintaining this deliberate dissonance, a physical body inhabiting chaos, while a quantum mind operates from the throne of victory, The architect corners the thermodynamics of the universe. The field must accelerate space-time metabolism. Probabilities collapse in an avalanche. People he does not know decide to call him. Markets fluctuate in his favor. Matter is forced to bend, break, and reassemble at terrifying speeds, solely to catch up and perfectly match the mathematical image the architect holds relentlessly in the lens of his measurement instrument. The calibration, perceptual firewall and observation diet. To eradicate quantum passivity and forge the power of a wave function collapser, you must install a tyrannical regime over what you permit before your eyes and ears today. Stop treating your attention as a cheap resource. Your attention is the laser with which you cut the diamond of reality. If pointed at trash, you render trash. The process demands a visceral audit of your observation habits and the induction of voluntary tactical blindness. Step 1. Eradication of superposition vocabulary. You must purge your language. Words are acoustic commands sending measurement coordinates. Combinations like hopefully or let's try are forbidden. These words are quantum poison. They keep your reality in a state of diffuse haze. An observer who hopes is an observer who has measured nothing. From today, substitute probabilistic vocabulary for the deterministic verb. Speak in the present tense. It is a fact. It is executed. Syntax is the first hammer blow. Step 2. Strict observation diet. Closing the terror loop. If you want to collapse abundance, you cannot afford to observe others' scarcity. If you consume news projecting global crises or interact with avatars vomiting fear, you are contaminating your instrument. The field does not judge if what you observe is yours. The field only registers the frequency of what you measure. If you measure the panic of a war on another continent through a screen, you collapse that energy into your own 3D perimeter. The architect executes a perceptual quarantine. He blocks low-frequency media and isolates his mind from the pack's opinions. He protects his lens with a military firewall, understanding that looking at misery is inviting misery to re-render in his own backyard. Step 3. Tactical blindness to slow rendering, 3D ignorance. This is the final exam. When you fix your measurement on a massive goal, the physical world, 3D, will try to break you. It will show you rejection or bank delays. The tactical order is, apply blindness. I strictly forbid you from reacting emotionally to the hologram's temporary setbacks. Develop the empty gaze of the quantum sociopath. Tell the 3D screen, my code is in, the function collapsed, and no force can make me doubt. By denying your emotional reaction to negative reality, you withdraw the energy that keeps it alive. Without the observer's energy, undesired reality dissolves, leaving space for the empire you ordered to materialize without resistance. To reclaim your throne, you must murder the spiritual beggar in your cortex today. Renounce the false humility of believing your desires are requests. The universe is not your master. The universe is your mathematical slave. It is a machine of infinite states lying in the darkness of probability, waiting for an operator with enough thermal brutality to take command, fix coordinates, and hit enter. Next time doubt tries to defocus your lens, next time you feel fear of committing to an absolute decision, stop your breath. Cut the mental fluctuation. Recognize the haze as the enemy of solidification. Lift your measurement instrument with the crushing gravity of a black hole. Focus on your consummated empire. Understand that the future is not a place you go to. The future is a quantum state you collapse toward the present. When you learn to look at your goals as scientific certainties already inhabiting your source code, you will cease to be prey. You will have transmuted into the quantum architect, the supreme lens. For you, reality is never an unknown to be discovered. It is, uniquely and exclusively, the 3D masterpiece forced to surrender before the lethal and immovable weight of your own gaze. Chapter 3. Causal Entanglement. Spooky Action at a Distance. In the relentless and mind-bending architecture of the unified field, the human species has been enslaved by a geometric illusion so dense that it has dictated the thermodynamic failure of 99% of the population. We shall call this cognitive trap the illusion of locality or the space-time stagnation. The ordinary individual, the entity we audit under the classification of the inert particle, or the passive observer, has had their brain formatted under the parameters of Isaac Newton's classical physics. One has been convinced that they are a physical object, separated by miles, oceans, and years from their supreme goals. Under the tyranny of this obsolete paradigm, the inert particle operates in a state of chronic exhaustion. Observe the X-ray of its mechanical wear. The inert particle believes that its financial empire, its unshakable health, or the loyalty of its allies are out there at a measurable physical distance. It is an error. In Newtonian physics, to move an object from point A to point B, you must apply a mechanical force proportional to the object's mass and overcome the medium's resistance, friction. Therefore, the passive observer spends their life pushing matter. One tries to convince clients with exhausting speeches and flies miles for meetings. One sends hundreds of emails, begs, manipulates, and sweats blood to alter physical events. One believes that success is a problem of logistics and brute force. One feels the immense distance between the current bank account and the millions craved, and that spatial gap plunges the individual into despair. They are lost in space. What this entity ignores, with an astrophysical blindness that keeps them chained to the mediocrity of dense matter, is that in the quantum void, space does not exist as an insulating barrier. Space is simply a rendering interface. It is a graphic artifice. Believing you must travel through space is primitively pathetic. It is as primitive as believing that to change a web page in a browser, you must unplug your monitor and run it to the server headquarters. In the unified field, everything is interconnected in an instantaneous information mesh. As long as humans try to move reality using Newtonian friction, they will remain an exhausted laborer. They will remain blind to the unnegotiable fact that the true architect never touches matter. He alters the source code from the central console and allows the entire universe to rewrite itself simultaneously, regardless of how many light years away the target is located. The physics, quantum entanglement, and the EPR paradox. To dismantle the blasphemy of physical separation and awaken to the omnipotence of the quantum architect's causal telemetry, we must abandon Newton's laws and dive into the most terrifying and sublime mathematics of theoretical physics. We must discover the phenomenon that made Albert Einstein tremble, non-locality. In 1935, Einstein, along with Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen, published a paper attempting to prove that quantum mechanics was incomplete. They formulated what is known as the EPR paradox. They pointed out that if two particles are born from the same reaction, their quantum states, like spin, remain mathematically linked. This phenomenon is called quantum entanglement. If we separate these two entangled particles, sending one to Earth and the other to the Andromeda galaxy, and a scientist measures the spin on Earth, the particle in Andromeda instantly collapses to adopt the complementary state. There is no travel time for the signal. The reaction is immediate. It is absolute zero in terms of latency. Einstein repudiated this concept. He called it spukhafte Fernwirkung, which translates as spooky action at a distance. For him, nothing could travel faster than light, so it was inconceivable that a particle knew what was happening to the other instantly. He believed the universe was local, meaning things could only be affected by their immediate surroundings. However, in 1964, John Bell formulated Bell's theorem, and later, Alain Aspect experimentally proved Einstein was wrong. The universe is non-local. Quantum entanglement is real. It is a fundamental law. The mathematical equation describing the perfect entangled state, the singlet state, for two spin 1 or 2 particles is een psi angle. Nafrak SQRT left, rup arrow 1 down, arrow angle, over down arrow, rup arrow angle 8. Dati. In this brutally precise equation, Jos up arrow angle dollars represents spin up and Haj down arrow angle dollars spin down. The equation dictates that particles do not have individual states. They share a single unified wave function. By measuring particle A and finding it up, particle B, no matter where it is, becomes instantly and mathematically down to conserve the system's angular momentum. It is a symmetric cosmic necessity. It is not that a signal travels between them, it is that, at the fundamental level of the quantum void, the two particles never separated. Three-dimensional spatial distance is a front-end illusion. In the back-end, the unified field, both particles occupy exactly the same mathematical point. This is the anatomy of power. The inert particle believes it is separated from its financial empire or its healing, but the entire universe came from a single point of infinite density during the Big Bang. All matter was born from the same primordial singularity. Therefore, at the subatomic level, you are already entangled with all your goals. You do not have to travel toward them. You do not have to push them. Distance is a dense hologram. You only have to alter your own local quantum spin state, and the other half of the equation, external reality, will be thermodynamically forced to collapse into the complementary form, instantly and effortlessly. The quantum leap, causal entanglement, and the death of distance. The transmutation from passive observer to the quantum architect marks the definitive annihilation of logistical effort as the primary mechanism of conquest. The architect assimilates with icy peace and astrophysical arrogance that he is the master control node of his own sector of the universe. He repudiates the idea of chasing goals. He understands that if matter is entangled in the unified field, moving frantically in physical space to reach success is as stupid as running toward a mirror trying to catch your own reflection. He assumes the execution of spatial sovereignty, causal entanglement. The process of hacking the universe through spooky action at a distance demands a dictatorial understanding of the conservation of states. Imagine the quantum architect facing a challenge that Newtonian physics would consider outside his geographical control. He must close a massive contract with a hostile client. The instinct of the inert particle would be to enter spatial panic. They are too far away. I need to call them 20 times. I need to apply physical pressure. That is the behavior of an organism trying to push the ocean with its hands. The architect stops the friction engine. He shuts down the 3D monitor. He executes the first protocol of entanglement, the closing of the spatial interface. He knows that trying to manipulate an external avatar by force creates destructive interference. He isolates himself in the vacuum chamber of his own consciousness. He fixes his attention on the mathematical coordinate of unity. He focuses on where he and the client are not two entities, but a single quantum system described by a unified wave function. Next, he initiates the second protocol, the inversion of the internal quantum spin. In the entangled state, if particle A adopts the up spin, particle B must adopt the down spin. The problem of the inert particle is that it approaches negotiation from a spin of need. By radiating need, the quantum system forces the external counterpart to adopt the complementary spin, retention or rejection. If you pursue, the universe must flee to maintain the equation's symmetry. The architect, operating from his throne of void, deliberately alters his own state. He assumes the spin of absolute saturation. He generates in his nervous system the frequency of "I already have it." He feels the sovereign boredom of the monarch, who does not need the contract because he already owns it. By injecting this signature of indifferent fullness into his local field, the architect has just fixed the state of particle A. The unified field, operating without latency and regardless of distance, is forced to react. To preserve the law of conservation, the universe must force particle B to collapse. Suddenly, thousands of miles away, the neurochemistry of the hostile client alters. They feel an irrational need to accept the deal. They perceive the architect as a magnetic authority to whom they must submit. Resistance collapses. The market responds favorably. The 3D world will call this luck or coincidence. The architect smiles with the cold blood of a theoretical physicist. He knows that magic is simply quantum science the herd does not yet understand. He has moved the tectonic plates of global financial destiny simply by altering in absolute silence the electromagnetic rotation of his own mental state. Causal telemetry and the uselessness of physical contact. To dominate conscious matter on this monumental scale, the architect must purge his motherboard of the fetish for physical contact. Modern society glorifies presence, the handshake, and geographic proximity as the only valid methods for power transmission. But field theory tells us the universe is a continuum. You are an electromagnetic excitation field walking over other excitation fields. When the architect assimilates spooky action at a distance, he realizes his true power of persuasion or conquest does not require proximity. We shall call this causal telemetry. It is the remote transmission of commanding data. The architect becomes a long-wave causal telemetry transmission tower. If he has to resolve a conflict with a powerful adversary, he does not request a meeting to clash polygons. Arguing is trying to align two out-of-phase waves by hitting them together. The architect withdraws to his inviolable quantum void. He identifies the vibratory signature of the conflict. He understands the adversary is entangled with him through that conflict. Then, he transmutes his own frequency. He raises his wave amplitude toward sociopathic detachment and peaceful domination. He forgives and annihilates the threat in his own mind. He does this not for morality, but as a tactical system disinfection maneuver. By changing his coordinate, the entangled system reacts. The adversary, in their distant office, loses the appetite for war. Friction vanishes from the network. Without Particle A's resistance, Particle B lacks an anchor to attack. The conflict dissolves into background static without a single shot fired in the physical world. The architect dominates 3D space precisely because he refuses to play by its local rules. He operates from non-locality. He is the epicenter of a mathematical earthquake that levels the walls of competition. The calibration, the spin falsification protocol and space ignorance. To eradicate Newtonian slavery from your nervous system and forge the ability to alter events at a distance, you must install a regime of directional isolation today. Stop treating the outside universe as a physical place you must conquer, and start treating it as a monitor projecting your internal state. The process demands a radical intervention and the induction of geographical blindness. Step 1. The declaration of non-locality, the end of over there. You must purge from your source code the illusion that success is in a different place than where you are. It is forbidden to think you must arrive. The concept of over there is a virus of separation. If you say, I want to get there, the unified field immediately creates the physical space and linear time to separate your here from your there. You are programming the distance. From today, assume the universe is a single point at your chest center. Step 2. The spin pairing protocol, the killer vibration. When facing a distant blockade, a delayed corporate response, or an indifferent market, I forbid you from applying Newtonian friction. Do not send the 5th follow-up email begging for attention. Stop the movement of physical fingers. Sit in silence. Identify the quantum state the external entity is manifesting, e.g., resistance. Understand this is a reflection of your own internal spin of anxiety. Apply psychological brute force to invert your spin. Lock yourself in the perception that the deal is signed and the money has been transferred. Feel the relief. Force your body to relax with the pride of the king who just gave the final order. Maintain that frequency with a thermal intensity that makes the vacuum boil. You are hacking Particle B, the exterior, from Particle A, your interior. Step 3. The friction silencer, physical effort quarantine. Withdraw. The greatest error is doing the quantum work and then ruining it by trying to force the result with heavy, unnecessary physical work. Move in the 3D world only through inspired action, action that flows effortlessly, driven by certainty. If you feel you are pushing a wall, stop immediately. You are lost in 3D. Trust sociopathically that the unified field is restructuring the atoms of the other person and moving the money across the ocean in real time. To reclaim your throne, you must murder the spatial laborer and the logistical planner in your lineage today. Linear effort is a tool designed to keep basic organisms tired. Next time you feel the immensity of 3D space trying to intimidate you, next time a continent or a time abyss seems to separate you from victory, stop your breath. Close your eyes. Sink into the deep darkness of your own subatomic core. Recognize that in that black abyss, you are the absolute owner of every particle. Every particle was born entangled with you in the fire of primordial creation. Invert the polarity of your will. Assume the icy weight of consummated possession. When you learn to bend corporate empires and alter human wills miles away without moving a limb, you will cease to be a nomad crossing deserts. You will have transmuted, by the unappealable right of causal entanglement, into the supreme quantum architect, the ghost force of nature that does not need to touch the world to govern it, for he understands that the whole world lies, trembling and obedient, in the indivisible palm of his own mind. Chapter 4. Constructive Interference and the Physics of Sabotage. In the mathematically perfect abyss of the unified field, failure is rarely the result of an external attack. The quantum universe is too vast and neutral to conspire against you. The absolute tragedy of the human condition, the true reason empires collapse before birth and fortunes evaporate, lies in an internal design flaw. We shall call this catastrophic failure in signal emission vibrational schizophrenia or split-frequency stagnation. Under the tyranny of this operative defect wanders, in a state of perpetual thermodynamic frustration, the ordinary individual, the inert particle or the passive observer. Analyze the telemetry of his disaster. The inert particle, after reading about the power of his own mind or experiencing a spark of ambition, sits at the control board of his life and attempts to issue an order to the unified field. With his conscious mind, 5% of his processing capacity, he declares a massive goal. I want to build a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He applies effort. He works 15 hours a day. He sweats. He designs strategies. However, just as he is about to cross the threshold of success, when the contract is on the table, when the perfect investment appears, the passive observer commits an act of incomprehensible self-immolation. He self-sabotages. He arrives late to the crucial meeting. He sends an aggressive and unnecessary email that destroys the deal. He develops a sudden psychosomatic illness. Or if he obtains the capital, he makes financial decisions so stupid that they return him exactly to the poverty line in less than a year. He cries and blames bad luck. What this specimen ignores, with an astrophysical blindness that condemns him to be the architect of his own hell, is that the quantum ecosystem does not reward muscular effort, nor does it understand good intentions. The unified field is a wave propagation medium. If you floor the gas of conscious desire but keep the brake of fear pressed, you do not advance a single millimeter. All you manage to do is melt the engine, burn the transmission, and generate thermal friction that annihilates the machinery. As long as humans believe it is enough to want success with the tip of the tongue, while feeling panic toward money or power in their guts, they will emit split signals. He will live like a broken radio transmitter, spitting static at the universe, completely deaf to the unnegotiable fact that the unified field never materializes contradictions. The field simply cancels them, reducing your destiny to a cold and crushing mathematical zero. The physics, wave phases, interference, and mathematical annihilation. To dismantle the blasphemy of self-sabotage and awaken to the absolute domination of a unified will, the quantum architect must abandon the couch of psychoanalysis and dive into acoustics and wave mechanics. We must understand how energy behaves in the void and discover the phenomenon of destructive interference. In classical and quantum physics, all energy, light, sound, and fundamental neural emissions, travels in waves. A wave has an amplitude, height and strength, and a frequency, vibration speed. But there is a third variable, the most critical and lethal of all, called phase. Phase determines at what point in its cycle a wave is. When two waves interact in the same space, they do not bounce, they overlap. The principle of linear superposition dictates that the resulting wave is the algebraic sum of the original two. Here, the biological difference between the monarch of the cosmos and the beggar of reality is defined. If you emit two waves in the same phase, crests and troughs match millimetrically, constructive interference occurs. The waves add up. If wave A has an amplitude of 10 and wave B has an amplitude of 10, the result is a massive wall of energy with an amplitude of 20. They multiply. They create an electromagnetic tsunami. But what happens when the waves are out of phase? What if the crest of wave A matches the trough of wave B? Destructive interference occurs. In pure mathematics, if we represent the waves as sinusoidal functions, double right t, a in sin omega t, plus A insin omega t plus IPI, $0. The result is absolute annihilation. The sum is zero, a flat line on the heart monitor of creation. You can have the two most powerful energy sources, but if you fire them out of phase, the universe registers no signal. The space becomes sterile. This is the secret anatomy of your failure. The inert particle is an emitter of destructive interference. Its conscious mind, wave A, declares, "I want to be a millionaire." This is a weak amplitude wave, but its subconscious mind, wave B, is emitting an opposite frequency. Money corrupts people. I don't deserve more than my parents. This subconscious wave possesses an amplitude 1,000 times greater. When the individual tries to advance, both waves clash in his electromagnetic biofield. Destructive interference is massive. They cancel each other out. The unified field receives a message of zero, a vacuum of static. And since the universe abhors a vacuum, it fills that flat line with the default option, stagnation and debt. Self-sabotage is not a character flaw. It is pure physics applied to the human mind. It is your own subconscious defense system emitting an inverse electromagnetic pulse to cancel a future that at the bottom of your cells terrifies you. The illusion of incandescent light versus the laser's edge. To understand the magnitude of the tragedy, the quantum architect must observe the difference between light emission sources. An ordinary individual's brain operates like a traditional incandescent bulb. A bulb emits much energy, consumes high voltage, and burns to the touch. It generates thermal noise. However, its light is pathetically weak. It can barely illuminate a small room and dissipates in the dark after a few meters. Why? Because the trillions of photons a bulb emits are out of phase. Each photon goes in a different direction. It is incoherent light. It is a pandemonium of destructive interference. The untrained human brain is exactly the same. It wants business success, but feels guilt in love. It wants to dominate the market, but fears the neighbor's opinion. It spends a monstrous amount of ATP thinking at breakneck speeds, heating neural circuits to the edge. But like the bulb, the projection is weak and diffuse. The quantum architect refuses to operate like a bulb. He formats his cerebral architecture to operate exclusively as a laser device, light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. A laser can have the same energy, watts, as a home bulb. The difference lies in a single word: coherence. In a laser, every single one of the billions of photons emitted possesses the exact same wavelength, travels in the same direction, and is in perfect phase. It is constructive interference taken to the scale of thermodynamic perfection. With no internal cancellations, the beam maintains 100% of its density across miles. The quantum architect is a biological laser. He admits no cracks in his source code. He has audited his subconscious and excised with an atomic scalpel any ancestral loyalty that contradicts his order. When he emits the deterministic measurement, there is no static. Thoughts, emotions, and muscle contractions are aligned. By radiating this extreme coherence, the architect cuts through market objections and pierces the fabric of 3D reality with an ease that looks like sorcery to the herd. It is not magic. It is wave physics. When you eliminate internal sabotage, your original intention's force multiplies to a density the world cannot resist. The transmutation, phase calibration, and synchrotron tuning. The evolution from passive observer to laser singularity demands the excision of emotional lies. The architect assimilates that he cannot lie to the unified field. The quantum void does not read positive messages on your mirror. It reads the thermal signature of your cellular vibration. He repudiates cheap psychology. He understands that repeating wealth affirmations while sweating in panic over bills is like trying to plug a nuclear leak with tape. He assumes the execution of frequency sovereignty, phase calibration, and static noise elimination. Hacking your own emission requires becoming an acoustic engineer of your own psyche. Imagine the architect facing a new expansion milestone. The primitive instinct of the amygdala, wave B of fear, tries to infiltrate. He does not try to think positive. He stops the system and descends to the boiler room of his consciousness. He executes the first protocol, dark frequency isolation. He sits in the darkness and deliberately provokes fear. He thinks of massive success and observes which areas of his body tense, a knot in the stomach. That physical sensation is the biometric reading of sabotage. It is the destructive wave. He interrogates the wave. What is the technical objection to this success? The deep mind responds, if we invoice millions, we will attract enemies. We will lose privacy. The inert particle would flee this answer, confirming the sabotage. The quantum architect smiles. He has isolated the corrupt variable. He has detected the phase shift. Next, he initiates the phase inverter. The architect knows he cannot erase fear energy because energy is not destroyed. He must invert its phase by 180 degrees so that instead of clashing, it adds to his desire. He takes the fear and overwrites it. Attracting enemies is the mathematical confirmation of my domination. I crave the demand. He assumes the sociopathic pride of the super-predator. By desiring the supposed negative consequences of success, fear loses its traction. Wave B turns around. Terror of responsibility transmutes into a thirst for territory. In that quantum microsecond, the subconscious wave aligns in perfect phase with expansion. Finally, the third protocol, laser coherence and the electromagnetic pulse. With both waves perfectly synchronized crest to crest, the architect injects voltage. He merges analytical visualization with the thermodynamic fire of unmovable certainty. He feels the goal as a dense weight in his chest. The unified field, which received incomprehensible static 10 minutes ago, is suddenly hit by a terrifyingly pure broadband data transmission. Constructive interference fires. Amplitude multiplies by 1,000. The laser beam of intention cuts environmental resistance. Probability algorithms are rewritten in his favor. The calibration, spectrum audit, and strict frequency diet. To eradicate vibrational schizophrenia and forge a massive titanium wavefront, you must install a dictatorial regime over your internal doubts today. Stop treating insecurities as endearing human traits. In the physics of materialization, your insecurities are Trojans trying to burn your motherboard. Step 1. The Echo Audit, Early Sabotage Detection. Do not try to manifest miracles if your baseline communication is contaminated. Before claiming to want an empire, audit how you behave toward money today. If you claim to want abundance but complain about bills, your system emits massive destructive interference. Envy is the tacit recognition of others' superiority and your own lack. Complaining is the echo of poverty. It is biologically forbidden to complain about prices or feel envy. Look at what you cannot afford as a temporary rendering glitch. That object is in my inventory. The server is just lagging. Step 2. Suppression Fire Protocol. Internal dialogue inversion. When you start a project that triggers the amygdala's siren, apply suppression fire. The host tries to calm fear with logic. The architect drowns fear with superior thermodynamic aggression. He responds with a crushing wave amplitude. When the inner voice says, "You will fail," you respond, "I am the measurement device of this universe. Failure is an optical illusion. I demand friction because it is my fuel." You do not allow the destructive wave to complete its cycle. You destroy it with an assertion of arrogance that forces the mind to yield. Step 3. Hermetic silence. External decoherence prevention. Even with internal laser coherence, you can suffer destructive interference from external sources. When you share colossal goals with mediocre minds, their hostile measurement devices emit waves of doubt. This radiation clashes with your creative wave. The architect seals his lips. He exercises hermetic silence. He operates in the vacuum of absolute confidentiality. He does not demand that the world believe in him. He does not even inform the world of his intentions until the building has pierced the horizon, forcing the mass to swallow the evidence of his victory. To reclaim the throne, murder the contradictory beggar and the auto-saboteur today. Nature abhors internal division and punishes static with the extinction of possibilities. Next time you feel dissonance, stop your biological machinery. Open the hood of your own consciousness and rip out the wiring of terror. Align the frequencies of your primary instinct with the cold precision of your conscious vision. Fuse them into a single hyperconduction circuit. When you learn to calibrate your nervous system to operate as a single unwavering wave of power, you will cease to be a flickering bulb. You will be the primordial laser. You will be the one whose unified vibration forces the mountains of destiny to part in silence before the inexorable passage of your absolute light. Chapter 5. The Uncertainty Principle, Surrender of Trajectory. In the unfathomable immensity of the unified field, the human mind harbors an evolutionary factory defect that constantly sabotages its ability to operate on a cosmic scale, a pathological addiction to predictability. The ordinary individual, the passive observer, has had his nervous system formatted in the African savanna. In that environment, survival depended on knowing exactly what predator lurked behind each bush. One has been indoctrinated in the illusion of linear control. Under this cognitive tyranny operates the passive observer in his attempt to alter reality. Observe the radiography of his tactical suffocation. The inert particle, after having collapsed his wave function and emitted a massive desire toward the quantum void, commits the most destructive act of thermodynamic heresy of his existence. He takes out a notebook and demands to know, step by step, how the universe is going to deliver that result. He demands a map. The individual designs a rigid master plan. He stipulates that the money must arrive through this specific client in this exact month, using this particular marketing strategy. He demands a detailed three-dimensional map. He wants to control the variables. We shall call this pathology the dictatorship of the how. What this organism ignores, with a mathematical blindness that instantly blocks the servers of the unified field, is that his three-dimensional brain, a mass of fat and water of barely 3 pounds, has a pathetically limited processing capacity. It cannot calculate the trillions of subatomic interactions or the global market. When the passive observer demands that the universe bend to his small, fragile, and predictable plan, he is insulting the infinite intelligence of the stochastic matrix. He is trying to force a quantum ocean through a plastic straw. And when the rigid plan inevitably fails, the individual enters panic and releases the goal. As long as the human being continues to believe that his job is to dictate to quantum physics the delivery route of his miracles, he will remain a frightened bureaucrat, suffocating his own dreams by trying to subject the creative chaos of the universe to the tyranny of his own spreadsheet. He is a prisoner of logic. The physics, Heisenberg's principle and quantum suffocation. To dismantle the blasphemy of logistical control and awaken to the dictatorial freedom of the quantum architect, we must abandon corporate planning manuals and dive into the most disturbing theorem of wave mechanics. We must discover the law of Werner Heisenberg, the uncertainty principle. In 1927, Werner Heisenberg mathematically demonstrated that in the subatomic realm, nature refuses to be cornered. He discovered that there are pairs of conjugate physical properties that cannot be known simultaneously with absolute precision. The most famous pair is position, Talt, and momentum, or trajectory, Partalt. The terrifying beauty of this law of the universe is condensed into one of the fundamental equations of creation. Tau delta xr delta PSG fractal. In this implacable formulation, a delta x dollars represents the uncertainty in position, and delta p dal represents the uncertainty in momentum, where it is going. What this equation dictates is an inversely proportional relationship. The more you try to measure the exact position of a particle, the less you know about its trajectory. And the more you try to control its trajectory, the more you lose its position. It is an intrinsic law of the fabric of reality. Matter abhors confinement. If you grab an electron and force it to stay still to see where it is, delta x dollars to 0, its momentum, delta p dal, becomes infinite, and the electron explodes toward the universe with incalculable energy. The human inert particle transfers this quantum violation to his own life. His position is his final goal. His momentum, trajectory, is the how, the step-by-step plan, the exact logistical route he demands to follow to get there. When the individual obsesses over the how, as delta p dal to 0, cosmic math comes into effect. The uncertainty of the position, as delta x dollars skyrockets toward infinity. The goal becomes unreachable. By micromanaging the delivery mechanism of the unified field, the passive observer produces quantum suffocation. He squeezes the neck of reality so hard, trying to control which door the money will enter through, that he ends up strangling probability itself. The universe then returns a 3D syntax error, the mirror maze and computational blindness. To understand the stupid arrogance of trying to dictate the how, the quantum architect must analyze the computational discrepancy between his brain and the primordial void. Imagine yourself inside an immense mirror maze of 10 square kilometers. Your goal is at the center. As an inert particle, you are at ground level. Your vision only reaches a few meters. You see a hallway to the right and decide with your linear intellect that this is the correct route. You cling to that hallway. If that hallway turns out to be blocked by a glass wall, you fall into depression. You hit the glass demanding that this be the door of your success. That is your computational blindness. You are operating in 2D. The unified field, however, is not inside the maze. The unified field is a satellite drone operating in higher dimensions, looking at the maze from above. The field sees trillions of simultaneous routes. It sees secret passages your intellect could never conceive. The field sees that the hallway on the right, the plan you love, actually leads you to a financial precipice, and that the only safe way to get you to the center is to force you to turn left through a firing, a crisis, or an apparent failure. You are blind to the higher logistics of the quantum server. When you cling to your linear trajectory, you are telling the cosmic supercomputer, turn off your omniscient sensors. I, with my vision limited to 3 meters, know better than you how to move the matter of this galaxy. The universe does not argue with local arrogance. It simply lets you crash. The quantum leap, tactical abandonment, and the blind coordinate. The thermodynamic transmutation from passive observer to the quantum architect demands a counterintuitive act of insurrection against the biological ego. The architect assimilates with icy lucidity that true authority does not consist of controlling pawns, it consists of demanding the king's head. He repudiates the obsession with the mechanism. He understands that if physics forbids knowing position and trajectory simultaneously, he will always choose to fix the position and hand over the trajectory to the stochastic of the void. He assumes the execution of algorithmic sovereignty, tactical abandonment. Hacking the uncertainty principle requires mastering the art of surrender of trajectory. To the frightened ego, surrender sounds like weakness. But in the architect's lexicon, it is the act of supreme arrogance. It is the haughtiness of the monarch who does not get his hands dirty with the palace sewers. Imagine the architect entering the coordinate of his victory. My corporation has monopolized this sector, and my net worth is 100 million. He has collapsed the wave function. He has fixed the variable of position, Fractals, with brutal mathematical precision. Then the amygdala tries to intervene with panic. The architect does not respond. He executes tactical abandonment. He cuts the cables of logistical necessity. He declares a temporary amnesty on the how. By letting go of control over the trajectory, delta p dollars becomes infinite. Heisenberg's mechanics play in his favor. The position delta xi stabilizes. By delegating the how to the unified field, the architect grants the universe infinite degrees of freedom. The field can now use chaos theory to its advantage. A traffic jam in Tokyo might delay an investor who ends up meeting an intermediary, leading to a capital injection you could never have planned. The quantum architect does not chase opportunity. He becomes the gravitational black hole in the center of the maze. By not forcing any route, all routes of the universe bend toward him. He navigates uncertainty not with terror, but with the icy anticipation of an engineer watching the system solve an equation. The mechanics of blind action and the now impulse. The vast majority of students of vulgar metaphysics confuse surrender to the how with physical inactivity. They believe that because the universe handles the root, they can sit on a sofa waiting for a suitcase of quantum gold to fall from the ceiling. The architect repudiates this stupidity. The universe is an interactive simulator, not a home delivery service. Surrender of trajectory does not mean you stop moving. It means you stop moving with long-term logistical desperation. Here enters the mechanics of blind action. As an architect, you no longer need to see the complete staircase. That is micromanagement. The only thing you need to see is the next step, the 1-3 centimeters from your foot in the present instant. The unified field communicates through pulses of intuition. It gives you small and opaque directives in the now. You feel an impulse to attend an event or send a message. To the linear intellect, that step lacks sense because it doesn't fit in the Excel sheet. But the architect knows the field is operating in higher dimensions. He executes the blind step. He takes immediate, violent action without demanding guarantees of why. He trusts the mathematics of the server. He advances in the dense three-dimensional fog, stepping on the floating stones that the universe materializes a millisecond before his boot touches the abyss. He moves fast with fury, working tirelessly in the present, but maintaining a clinical indifference toward how that work connects to the final result. The calibration, the delegation protocol, and the funeral of the rigid plan. To eradicate quantum suffocation and forge the algorithmic confidence of an architect of realities, you must install a regime of demolition over your logistical expectations today. Stop treating your intellect as a cosmic GPS and start using it exclusively to hold the impact coordinate. It is a total shift. The process demands direct mathematical intervention. Step 1. Fixing the terminal coordinate, the omega point. Review your supreme goal. Remove all delivery conditions. If your goal was, I want to earn 10 million selling this software this year, you are violating Heisenberg. You are dictating both variables. Purify the coordinate. The omega point must be the pure result. I own a net worth of $10 million. Period. By removing the condition of the software, you release the universe. If the software market collapses, the architect shrugs, knowing the field just recalculated the route through other means. Step 2. Dismantling the rigid plan, burning the map. If you have a detailed 5-year map on your wall with forced milestones, take it down and burn it. It is a monument to your dimensional ignorance. Having a rigid map is putting bars on the universe. From today, operate under directional vectors. You do not have an exact map. You have a compass calibrated toward the north of your success. You make short-term decisions based on tactical information the environment offers today, simply evaluating if that move brings you closer to your goal. You are quantum water seeking the crack of least resistance. Step 3. Execution of the next logical blind action, the render button. When paralysis by analysis tries to freeze your blood, apply the emergency protocol. Look at your hands. Look at your environment in a 5-meter radius. Ask, what is the highest impact move I can execute in the next 2 hours? And do it. Send the prototype. Make the cold call. Do not demand that this action makes you a millionaire tomorrow. Demand only that it breaks the universe's inertia. The universe is a reactive engine. When you execute the next logical action in total tactical blindness, you step on the gas of your destiny. To reclaim absolute command of the stochastic matrix, you must murder the neurotic micromanager in your frontal lobe today. Renounce the false arrogance of believing your biological brain is superior to the mathematical engine that calculates the birth and death of stars in real time. Trust the server. Trust the next time the ecosystem closes a door, next time the perfect plan collapses and you feel the desperation of having lost the map, stop the cortisol secretion. Close your 3D eyes. Smile in the middle of the subatomic fog. Recognize chaos not as a threat, but as the field's calculation matrix. Release the mechanical reins of reality. Fix your dictatorial gaze only on the throne of your omega coordinate. When you learn to move your pieces without demanding explanations from quantum physics, you will be the sovereign of the void. All matter will structurally surrender to the gravity of your will. Chapter 6. Quantum Decoherence, the Thermal Leak of the Will. In the immense, icy, and mathematically relentless architecture of the unified field, the gestation of a three-dimensional miracle demands the most extreme and sterile conditions in the universe. When a massive idea has just been collapsed in the mind of the observer, that project exists in a state of extreme fragility. It is an embryo. However, the vast majority of the human species suffers from a design flaw in its communication motherboard, the biological inability to withstand the pressure of silence. We shall call this lethal pathology, which murders more destinies of greatness than any global economic crisis, the stagnation of vocal hemorrhage. Under the tyranny of this defect operates the inert particle, or the passive observer. Observe the radiography of his self-immolation. The inert particle experiences an epiphany. He designs a brilliant business plan, or decides to forge an elite physique. His brain experiences a spike in kinetic energy. He is a nuclear reactor. But then the analog ego, addictive and driven by the ancestral need to belong to the herd, commits the most stupid act of physics. He opens his mouth. The inert particle takes his phone, posts on social media, and announces, "I'm going to launch an incredible company." Or, "This year I will become a millionaire." In the exact instant those words leave his vocal cords, an invisible thermodynamic catastrophe occurs. The individual experiences a massive release of dopamine. His brain receives social validation, likes, and premature congratulations from other inert particles. The primitive brain registers the project as completed. The creative tension evaporates. The reactor pressure drops to zero. The individual feels relaxed and satisfied without having moved a single atom in the real world. He has extracted the emotional reward of success in advance. When Monday arrives, he discovers that his energy reserves, his quantum ATP, are completely empty. He lacks the driving force to execute because he spent all his rocket fuel making noise on the launch pad. As long as humans believe their plans are anecdotes to entertain the masses, they will remain validation beggars. They will live aborting their own miracles, deaf to the fact that an open mouth is an escape valve. It is a valve where the energy of domination leaks into the void, leaving behind only the inert shell of unfulfilled promises. The physics, quantum decoherence, and the noise of the thermal bath. To dismantle the blasphemy of premature extroversion and awaken to the lethal hermeticism of the quantum architect, we must abandon behavioral psychology and descend to the world's coldest laboratories, quantum computing facilities. We must discover the executioner of superpositions, quantum decoherence. We previously established that matter can exist in superposition, where multiple possibilities coexist and where waves are in coherence, aligned in perfect phase to create constructive interference. This coherent state is the holy grail of particle physics. It is where computational and manifestation miracles happen. But nature hates isolated coherence. The 3D universe is a chaotic, dense, and hot environment that physicists call the thermal bath, or the macroscopic environment. Quantum decoherence is the exact process by which a fragile and perfect quantum state loses its magic by interacting with this hostile environment. If physicists put a qubit in superposition, they must keep it in an absolute vacuum, protected by heavy shields of lead and gold and cooled to just above absolute zero. Why this level of sociopathic isolation? Because if a single photon or a minuscule thermal vibration hits that atom, a mathematical disaster occurs. The atom becomes entangled with the environment. The phase information, the purity of the creative wave, leaks rapidly into the immense noise of the outer universe. In the mathematics of density matrices, the loss of this coherence over time is described by the exponential decay of the off-diagonal elements. Dao hotiu t, egu ho 0, e, where Todd is the decoherence time. Once time $2 exceeds $d, the superposition collapses irreversibly into statistical dust. The magic particle stops being a wave of infinite possibilities and becomes an ordinary speck of matter. The magic dies. The machine stops. The quantum architect transfers this law to the gestation of his own empire. Your newly formed goals are the qubits of your cerebral computer. They are in a state of perfect internal coherence. But the world of mediocre humans and conformist friends are the thermal bath. They are a hot, macroscopic environment full of static, doubts, fears, and realism. You must protect your qubits. When you open your mouth and tell your fragile quantum project to an ordinary mind, you are allowing a photon of static to hit your qubit. The other individual's consciousness acts as an observation environment. Since they are calibrated for scarcity, their gaze measures your project and triggers quantum decoherence. In minutes, your density matrix collapses. Your brilliant potential empire becomes a simple and unreachable earthly fantasy. The interference of the environment has murdered your miracle in the geometric cradle of its creation. You have allowed the external noise to overwrite your internal signal of power. The inverted Zeigarnik effect and the physics of the pressure valve. To dominate matter on a planetary scale, the architect must understand fluid mechanics applied to human will. Physics dictates that the kinetic energy needed to propel a rocket or move a turbine comes exclusively from one thing: confined pressure. If you have a boiler at 1,000 degrees, water becomes steam. If the boiler is hermetically sealed, pressure increases to monstrous levels. That pressure, having no exit, is channeled through a single piston. The force of the piston is what turns the wheels and forges industrial revolutions. Speaking is opening the escape valve of the boiler. It releases the power. In psychology, the Zeigarnik effect states that the human mind remembers and obsesses over incomplete tasks much more than finished ones. An incomplete task generates cognitive tension. It is a thermal dissonance in the brain that begs to be resolved through action. This is the source of your drive. When you have a great project in secret, your brain operates under extreme Zeigarnik effect. You have a massive dissonance between your current 3D reality and the quantum coordinate you have fixed in your mind. This internal friction generates a hell of thermal pressure. You feel the fire in your veins. You wake up at 4 in the morning to program code or train, because the only biological way to relieve that cognitive agony is materializing the project. The piston moves with unstoppable violence. But if you suffer from vocal hemorrhage and tell everyone your plan, you execute an inverted Zeigarnik effect. By vocalizing the plan and being validated, the limbic brain misclassifies the event. It tricks the neural network into believing the success identity has already been acquired. You have opened the safety valve. The steam of desire escapes with a harmless hiss. The pressure in the room drops to zero. When you return to your desk, the creative hell has been extinguished. You feel lethargic. You no longer feel the urgent need to tear down the bars of your financial prison because in your social simulation you already feel like a free man. You have traded an immortal empire for 10 minutes of cheap attention. The quantum leap, the hermetic vacuum, and the architecture of silence. The thermodynamic transmutation from passive observer to the quantum architect demands the most absolute act of tyranny against one's own ego, the amputation of the desire to be applauded before crossing the finish line. The architect assimilates that his word is a military laser that must not be drawn for play. He repudiates the table of talkers. He understands that if he wants to force the universe to render a miracle, he must seal the chamber of creation in radioactive isolation. He assumes the execution of thermal sovereignty, the hermetic vacuum, and the architecture of silence. This requires a sociopathic policy. Imagine the quantum architect designing his next impact maneuver. The inert particle would feel the urgency to justify his new actions to his environment. If he starts waking up at dawn or stops attending low-level social rituals, he would feel the need to explain, "It's because I'm working on a project." The architect blocks the valve. He executes the first containment protocol, the event horizon fall. In astrophysics, the event horizon is the invisible boundary surrounding a black hole. Once matter or light crosses that line toward the interior, it never comes back out. Information is trapped forever. The architect's mind is an information black hole. Information about his strategies or 5-year plans crosses the event horizon of his prefrontal cortex and is sealed. Not a single photon of light escapes. No one around him knows what he is working on. To the macroscopic environment, he looks at rest. By maintaining this camouflage of normalcy and this deathly silence, the architect avoids the friction of others' resistance. No one can attack or sabotage a goal they do not know exists. Decoherence is mathematically impossible because the system is disconnected from the public observation network. Next, he initiates the second protocol: pressure absorption, internal combustion. Maintaining a secret of imperial proportions hurts. The physical body, addicted to validation, burns with the desire to show off the brilliant idea. The architect embraces this pain. He feels the internal boiler pressurizing. He does not flee this thermal sting. He channels it. He uses that repressed desperation to hit the keyboard or sharpen the sword in absolute solitude. That contained energy is pure syntropy, the antidote to chaos, organizing the atoms of his company without leaving a thermal trace outside. He is forging destiny. The deployment of solid matter, the undeniable revelation. Does this mean the architect never speaks of his work? Absolutely not. But the quantum architect possesses a strict code regarding rendering timing. He knows a quantum system can only be exposed to the outside thermal bath when the wave function has fully collapsed and atoms have formed a crystal structure. The structure must be dense enough to withstand the ballistic impact of public opinion without breaking. We shall call this the undeniable revelation, or the monolith effect. When the architect finally breaks the hermetic seal, he does not do it to ask for opinions or advice. He presents a consummated fact. He does not say, "I'm thinking of writing a book." He throws the printed manuscript on the table. He does not say, "I'm going to try to get in shape." He simply appears 6 months later, exposing an exoskeleton of muscles. He does not say, "I'm going to launch a company." He delivers the finished product. When you present a monolith of solid matter, quantum decoherence is no longer a threat. The hostile environment may doubt an idea, but human minds and classical physics cannot argue against the undeniable gravity of a physical result. Before the monolith, the static of the herd falls silent. The pack's envy hits the obsidian wall of the already built empire and crashes without leaving a single scratch on the paint. By isolating the gestation phase in the darkness of the void, the architect ensures the universe is forced to bow before the work of a ghost that no one saw working. The calibration, the containment protocol, and the sealing of the reactor. To eradicate thermal leakage from your vocal cords and forge the isolation capacity of a quantum supercomputer, you must install a dictatorship of silence today. Stop treating your words as free sounds and start treating them as force vectors that must only be fired when the cannon points at the jugular. Step 1. The 100-day verbal quarantine, tactical vow of silence. From this cosmic microsecond, I institute a gag order on your nervous system. You are absolutely forbidden to reveal your unmaterialized goals to any human organism that is not an indispensable operating partner for the plan's execution. Not to your partner, if they lack your laser frequency, nor to your mother, nor your social circle. If someone asks what you are up to, apply sociopathic omission. Respond with predictable banalities. Nothing new, just working hard, the usual. You become boring background noise. Use invisibility as a shield. Step 2. Suffocation of the false reward circuit, dopamine redirection. When the biological urge to brag about a small, unconsummated victory attacks your system, execute circuit suffocation. Stop your thumbs on the phone screen. Recognize that impulse as your body trying to steal the energy of final success. Close the tap on cheap dopamine. Open the work terminal and channel that urgent frustration into preparing with a thermodynamic aggression 1,000 times superior to your competition. Convert, "I want to tell it," into "I am going to massacre them in the boardroom." Transmute chatter into pure kinetic talk. Step 3. Designing the black vault, the incubation space. You must build a physical and digital space that acts as your black vault. An environment, an encrypted document, or an acoustically isolated room where your project can exist in its pure superposition state without the world's interference. There, behind closed doors, you are the absolute monarch. You write your goals with a god's arrogance and design systems with a machine's coldness. You are the only authorized observer of the wave function. You keep the vacuum chamber sterilized of external opinions until the mass of your empire is heavy. To reclaim sovereign control over reality's rendering, you must murder the boastful child and the approval addict in your tissues today. Renounce the false belief that you need the herd's support for your projects to survive. The herd's support is static radiation. It is the thermal caress that withers your will. Next time you feel the ego's poison rising, begging you to open your mouth to impress holographic avatars, close your jaws until your teeth ache, bite the tongue of mediocrity, swallow the burning pressure of creative fire, and seal your soul with lead vaults. True power is inherently mute during ignition. When you learn to operate as an information black hole, when you manage to incubate the cataclysm of your own success in the coldest, most silent trench of your consciousness, you will cease to be a loudspeaker of noise. You will have transmuted into the supreme architect, the singularity in the shadows. For by the time the world hears the roar of the thunder, the undeniable lightning of your empire will have already split the earth exactly beneath their feet. Chapter 7. Thermodynamics and Syntropy, the Anti-Decay Engine. In the immense and chilling darkness of the unified field, there exists a silent, odorless, and invisible executioner that devours empires, annihilates biology, and pulverizes fortunes with a slowness so sadistic that the human mind rarely detects the execution until it is already dust. The ordinary individual, that entity we audit under the strict classification of the inert particle or the passive observer, has been inoculated with the most infantile and destructive fantasy of classical physics. The belief that matter and success, once achieved, possess the intrinsic capacity to maintain themselves. Under the hypnosis of this lethal illusion of permanence, the passive observer operates in his three-dimensional cycle. Observe the radiography of his operational rot. The inert particle collapses a probability in his favor. He manages to build a profitable business, forges an aesthetically superior body, or secures a high-value relationship. After the initial collapse, the individual's primitive brain, designed for extreme ATP conservation, emits a signal of thermal relaxation. The individual sighs, reclines on his throne of sand, and pronounces the death sentence of his own creation. I made it. Now I just have to maintain it. He stops innovating in his corporation. He stops subjecting his body to the mechanical tension that built the muscle. He stops injecting icy, focused attention into his network of allies. He believes that the current state of his reality is a stone monument that will resist the friction of space-time. This is a fatal miscalculation. We shall call this pathology of negligence, where the individual withdraws his conscious energy flow, believing the system will operate on autopilot indefinitely, the stagnation of passive rot. What the inert particle ignores, with a cosmological blindness that guarantees the absolute disintegration of all his works, is the void. He ignores that in the quantum void, the state of maintenance does not exist. The universe is not a museum that preserves your trophies. It is a relentless thermodynamic shredder. The natural state of any form of organized matter, if left to its own devices, is rot, dispersion, and chaos. It is a one-way street. As long as the human being continues to believe he can build an empire and then go to sleep without the unified field dismantling his work brick by brick, he will remain a tourist in the cosmos. He will live building sandcastles on the shore of an ocean of probability, crying every time the tide erases his work. He remains deaf to the unnegotiable fact that existence itself is an act of violent rebellion against the laws of physics, and greatness can only be sustained through an energetic assault, constant and ruthless, against the natural tendency of the universe to destroy you. Order is an active and expensive conquest. The physics entropy, the second law, and the arrow of time. To dismantle the blasphemy of relaxation and awaken to the dictatorial vigilance of the quantum architect, we must abandon self-help manuals and dive into the most depressing, absolute, and unshakable law of theoretical physics. We must understand why everything you love is mathematically doomed to die. We must discover the mechanism of cosmic decay, the second law of thermodynamics and entropy. The first law of thermodynamics dictates that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transformed. But it is the second law that dictates the macabre direction in which that transformation flows. The second law establishes that, in an isolated system, the degree of disorder, chaos, and loss of information always increases or remains the same over time. It never decreases spontaneously. The measure of this chaos and disorder is called entropy, denoted by the letter Saturn. The Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann engraved on his own tomb the fundamental equation that describes this mathematical condemnation. KB. In this majestic and lethal equation, KB$ is the Boltzmann constant, and W$ represents the number of possible microstates. In simple terms, there are infinitely more ways for your life to be a chaotic disaster, giant W$, than ways for your life to be a perfectly ordered multi-billion-dollar empire, tiny W$. If you take a beautifully structured glass, low entropy, and drop it, it breaks into 1,000 chaotic pieces, high entropy. The universe will never, under any natural circumstance, take 1,000 pieces of broken glass from the floor and spontaneously fuse them into a perfect glass. The arrow of time points unidirectionally toward dispersion. When the inert particle stops injecting energy into his business, the business does not stay static. It enters the clutches of Boltzmann's equation. Employees make mistakes, inflation devours capital, customers lose interest, machines rust. The universe is executing its thermodynamic mandate. It is disassembling the highly improbable structure of your success to return its atoms to the state of general static. Absolute equilibrium in thermodynamics is called heat death. A system in equilibrium is a system where there are no longer temperature differences, no energy exchange, no movement. It is a biologically dead system. When the inert particle seeks balance, he is praying for the heat death of his own destiny. Syntropy and the paradox of Maxwell's demon. But if the entire universe marches toward chaos and disintegration, how is it possible that galaxies, stars, human DNA, and massive corporations exist? How does ordered matter survive? Here is where theoretical physics reveals the secret weapon of consciousness. The universe as a whole tends to entropy. However, locally, in specific and closed areas, you can temporarily reverse the arrow of time. You can reduce entropy and create pure, brilliant, and structured order. This anti-entropic process is known as negentropy or syntropy. Erwin Schrödinger postulated that life feeds on negative entropy. But reversing chaos has an absolute price that the universe collects in advance. It requires the deliberate, massive, and uninterrupted injection of work, W, and attention, information. The most beautiful thought experiment to illustrate the power of the mind over entropy is Maxwell's demon. In 1867, James Clerk Maxwell imagined a box full of gas divided into two chambers by a wall with a small gate. At the gate sits an omniscient being, a demon. The gas molecules bounce chaotically, high entropy. Some are fast, hot, and others slow, cold. The demon uses his consciousness to measure them. When he sees a fast molecule, he opens the gate and lets it pass to the right chamber. When he sees a slow molecule, he opens the door for it to pass to the left chamber. By separating hot from cold, using pure information and conscious selection, the demon heats one side and cools the other. He has reversed the second law of thermodynamics. He has created order, syntropy, from pure chaos, using focused intention as a filtering mechanism. The inert particle is a gas container where entropy flows freely. He does not filter his thoughts, select his actions, or organize his energy. His life becomes a lukewarm and useless thermal equilibrium. The quantum architect is Maxwell's demon made flesh. He is the syntropic force of the local universe. He sits at the gate of his own consciousness and audits every molecule of information, every atom of his capital, and every millisecond of his time. He lets through what heats the reactor of his empire and blocks everything that cools his will. He understands that dictatorial attention is not a psychological tool. It is a fundamental physical force capable of reordering the thermodynamics of the matter around him. He is the filter of reality. The quantum leap, the anti-decay engine, and syntropic aggression. The transmutation from passive observer to the quantum architect marks the end of indulgence and the acceptance of a perpetual biological war against deterioration. The architect assimilates with icy lucidity and cosmic pride that he cannot rest, because prolonged rest is a gift that only belongs to corpses. He repudiates the illusion of static success. He understands that if the second law of thermodynamics is constantly pushing his empire toward collapse, he must exert a diametrically opposite normal force, but of superior magnitude. He assumes the execution of entropic sovereignty through syntropic aggression. The process to hack the deterioration of reality demands the adoption of an operating model based on continuous energetic overcompensation. Imagine the quantum architect in command of his three-dimensional structure: physical health, investment portfolio, network loyalty. The herbivore ego would whisper to relax. The architect annihilates this defective directive. He executes the first protocol, the assumption of infinite decay. He does not assume things are fine. By mathematical default, he assumes that the instant he looks away, his walls begin to rust, money loses value density, and bonds disintegrate. He observes his creation with the clinical eye of a maintenance engineer in a nuclear plant. He knows that syntropy is not stored indefinitely. Order has to be recreated every day. Next, he initiates the second evolutionary protocol, the directed friction engine, the injection of energy. He feeds the system. To keep a system away from thermodynamic equilibrium, you must inject external energy, work. The architect does not repair fissures by returning them to their original state. That would only slow entropy. He uses the detection of damage to apply constructive interference and elevate the system to a higher order. If the corporation shows a $1% loss of efficiency, the architect does not adjust screws. He enters with massive thermodynamic aggression. He dismantles the department, injects new technology, purges mediocre operators, and installs a protocol $300% more aggressive. He forces a metabolic mutation. If his biological body shows signs of metabolic stagnation, he does not try to rest. He increases the gravitational load in his training, forcing cellular apoptosis and injecting brutal thermal stress to force mitochondria to reproduce. He does not maintain order, he expands order. He colonizes probability space. Finally, the architect applies the third protocol, the quarantine of environmental chaos. Just as a quantum computer requires isolation to avoid thermal decoherence, the architect isolates his system from external entropic forces. Average human society is a gravity well of high entropy. It produces only drama. The architect seals the gates of his biofield. He expels high-entropy entities, energy vampires, pessimists, the incompetent, as quickly as Maxwell's demon blocks wrong particles. He does not tolerate others' chaos. His environment is a sanctuary of Spartan order, cold and crystalline, where her atom has a function. The cosmic return on investment, the ROI of syntropy. The sacrifice required to be a continuous generator of syntropy is immense. The quantum architect burns his own metabolic energy to maintain the order of the void. To the passive observer, this eternal war against deterioration seems like an exhausting hell. They prefer to surrender to the current of chaos. But the architect knows the hidden mathematics of the universe. He knows that nature pays a monstrous compound interest to those who defy its destructive tendency. When you maintain a highly ordered system long enough, laser focus, optimized corporation, the system stops consuming linear energy. It shifts physics. It creates what in non-equilibrium thermodynamics are called dissipative structures, concept by Nobel laureate Ilya Prigogine. A dissipative structure, like a hurricane or the human brain, forms only in extreme non-equilibrium. Far from collapsing, the system under constant pressure self-organizes into a higher pattern. The architect's empire reaches a critical gravitational mass. Money, power, and opportunities begin to flow toward the ordered structure almost without additional effort, because massive order attracts resources to sustain itself. The architect has defeated the second law. He has become a syntropic vortex. He is a machine for extracting matter from chaos and forging it into an architecture of millimetric precision, using the very force of destruction of the universe as the high-octane fuel for his three-dimensional immortality. He turns entropy against itself to power his own ascending evolution. The calibration, the continuous tension protocol, and the eradication of rust. To eradicate thermodynamic negligence from your source code and forge the infinite discipline of a syntropic singularity, you must install today a regime of constant war against the comfort of your past achievements. Stop treating victories as beds to sleep in and start treating them as engines requiring fuel. The process demands a millimetric audit of the cracks in your structure and the forced induction of subatomic rearrangement. Step 1. The entropy audit, the hunt for dispersion. Your system is already rotting as you read this word. Audit the 3 pillars: capital, biology, and focus. Search for leaks. Search. Look for thermal leaks. Where is your capital stagnant, losing value against inflation? What part of your physical anatomy has lost range of motion or force density due to lack of mechanical load? What relationships in your circle are requiring useless emotional maintenance without providing strategic return? Locate the rust. The simple act of observing decay with the implacable eye of consciousness, the observer effect, Chapter 2, interrupts the expansion of chaos. Point your laser toward what you have let decay in the darkness of your negligence. Step 2. The injection of asymmetric syntropy, the order shock. Apply violent order. Do not try to clean the dust of chaos subtly. Respond to entropy with asymmetric violence of order. Take the area of greatest decay and subject it to a syntropic shock. If your finances are chaos, I forbid you from delegating them. Sit in total isolation for 12 hours. Extract every financial datum. Categorize every cent. Delete expense lines with the coldness of a guillotine. Redesign the algorithm of your income. Map the architecture of capital until the disaster becomes a military roadmap. If you inject massive mental energy, chaos yields immediately. You break the arrow of local decay and rise. Step 3. Dictatorial rejection of thermal equilibrium. Systematized discomfort. The universe will constantly seduce you with the promise that you can now rest. Your limbic brain will beg you to slow down. I command you to deactivate that comfort alarm. You must institutionalize imbalance in your daily life. When a task becomes easy and mechanized, thermal equilibrium has begun. That is the exact moment to destroy it. Add a new variable of friction. Learn a code language you do not understand. Expand operations to a market that terrifies you. Subject your muscles to isometric tension loads that make you tremble. If you are not feeling the friction of discomfort, you are not generating syntropy. You are simply dying pleasantly. Force your structure to dissipate high levels of energy to force its perpetual mutation. Reclaim your throne as the architect of local physical laws and murder the complacent tourist today. Renounce the false illusion that the unified field will ever stop its shredding machinery to let you breathe. Nature is a mill of infinite entropy, and in its eyes, everything that is not actively fighting to grow is already biomass classified for recycling. Do not be part of the discarded waste. Next time you feel tiredness whispering to close your eyes, next time the mirage that things are already resolved tries to seduce your guard, stop your basal breathing. Open the eyes of your consciousness with geometric violence. Observe the cosmic dust accumulating at the edges of your empire. Rise up. Rise not as a tired human, but as the thermodynamic demon of the void. Reject the decline. Inject the purifying fire of your structured will into the cracks of reality. When you learn to love the infinite war against chaos, you will cease to be a temporal construction destined to collapse in time. You will have transmuted by the unappealable right of syntropy into the quantum architect, the vortex of supreme anti-decay, the radiant entity for whom the rot of matter is simply the sterile fuel used to forge, crystallize, and expand the lethal perfection of his own eternal architecture. Chapter 8. The Holographic Principle, Fractals of Reality. In the vast, icy, and ruthless architecture of the unified field, the human mind has been infected by a perceptive virus that ensures its eternal submission to the forces of the ecosystem. We shall call this geometric flaw in information processing the scale illusion or the microbe complex. The ordinary individual, that biological entity, we classify him under the strict taxonomy of the inert particle, or the passive observer, has been indoctrinated to measure three-dimensional reality using a linear and obsolete ruler. He has been taught to look at the size of things. Under the tyranny of this spatial blindness operates the passive observer, crushed by his insignificance. Observe the radiography of his mathematical defeat. The inert particle wakes up in the morning and looks at the immensity of his problems. He observes massive corporate debt, a global market saturated by gigantic competitors, or the abyss of time separating him from his financial empire. He compares the smallness of his biological body. Comparing his current resources with the monstrous size of the three-dimensional barrier, the individual's nervous system suffers a thermal collapse. The amygdala emits a signal of surrender. The problem is too big. The system is against me. I am just a drop in the ocean. The inert particle believes that to tear down a wall, he needs a ram. He believes he needs to build a 100-meter battering ram. He believes that to alter the macroeconomics of his lineage, he needs to fight directly against the macroeconomic forces of the world. This fallacy of linear proportionality leads him to paralysis. He tries to solve colossal problems by fighting colossal battles for no ATP. Without energy or sufficient capital, he ends up being crushed by the gears of the system. What this organism ignores, with an astrophysical ignorance that condemns him to be a helpless spectator in the simulation, is that in the fundamental structure of the quantum void, size is an optical hallucination. It is just a render trick. The notions of large and small do not exist in the source code of the universe. They are simple rendering tricks of the three-dimensional interface. While the human being continues to believe that to conquer the immensity of the exterior he must fight against giants, he will continue to exhaust his mitochondrial reserves in useless wars. He will live crashing against the volume of the hologram, completely deaf to the unnegotiable fact that the quantum architect never attacks the size of the projection. He simply alters the microscopic code in the projector's lens, forcing the entire galaxy to restructure without having shed a single drop of sweat on the battlefield. The physics, black hole entropy, and the holographic principle. To dismantle the blasphemy of scale and awaken to the geometric omnipotence of the singularity, we must abandon human intuition and descend to the most destructive and mysterious event in general relativity, the event horizon of a black hole. We must understand how the universe stores information and discover the holographic principle. For decades, physicists battled a terrifying enigma. If you throw an object into a black hole, that information disappears from the observable universe. But thermodynamics dictates that information cannot be destroyed. Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking resolved this enigma by formulating an equation that shook the foundations of physics. They discovered that the entropy, the amount of information of a black hole, is not proportional to its three-dimensional volume, the space inside, but is exactly proportional to the area of its two-dimensional surface, the event horizon. The Bekenstein-Hawking entropy equation is engraved into the fabric of the cosmos with this beauty. At S where S $$ is the black hole entropy, K $$ is the Boltzmann constant, A $ is the area of the event horizon, and dl $= is the Planck length, the pixel of reality. What this equation dictates is that all the 3D info is encoded in the 2D surface. From this discovery, physicists Leonard Susskind and Gerard 't Hooft derived the holographic principle. It postulates that our entire three-dimensional universe, with its galaxies, its mountains, your debts, your companies, and your enemies, is nothing more than a holographic projection. Reality resides in a remote 2D boundary. In an optical hologram, if you take a photographic plate and break it into 1,000 pieces, each piece does not contain a fraction of the image. It contains the image of the totality. The macrocosm is entirely encoded in the microcosm. The information of the whole is fractally compressed in each of the parts. This is the key. The human inert particle lives deceived by the volume of the projection. He believes his problem is giant and feels crushed by it. But the quantum architect reads the Bekenstein-Hawking equation and smiles with the cold blood of a mathematical god. He assimilates that the 3D volume of his empire is only an illusion from the plate. The macro is projected by the plate of his own psyche and his daily micro-habits. If the giant image projected in the sky is chaotic and poor, the architect does not take up a sword to fight the sky. He withdraws his attention from the illusion of size, lowers his gaze to the microscopic Planck pixel of his routine in the present. He looks at the two-dimensional boundary of his mind and rewrites the information there. By altering the symmetry of the smallest pixel, the unified field obeys the laws of cosmic holography and instantly re-renders the entire galaxy to match the new encoding. He changes the core code to change the visible output. fractal geometry and scale symmetry. To execute this holographic tyranny with military precision, the architect must master the visual language of the unified field, fractals. In classical geometry, things have defined scales. A circle is a circle, but nature does not operate with flat blocks. Nature builds the universe using fractals. This is code efficiency. A fractal is a mathematical object whose structure repeats at different scales. It possesses the property of self-similarity. If you observe a snowflake under a microscope, the tiny branch has the exact hexagonal shape as the giant branch. If you observe the network of veins in your body, it has the same branching as rivers. The structure of the body reflects the structure of a continent, which has the same structure as an oak tree. As it is above, so it is below. As it is in the immense, so it is in the minuscule. This is the physics of the daily sabotage of the passive observer. The individual believes he can be a king while behaving like a slave. He believes he can lead $100 million corporation while his room is messy, his diet is chaotic, and he is unable to keep his word on a small promise. The inert particle pleads, "When I have the big company, I will be disciplined." The unified field repudiates this asymmetry. Fractal math forbids this. Fractal mathematics structurally forbids that the superior pattern be different from the base pattern. If the base pixel of your fractal, your morning, your thought, your drawer, is encoded with the information of chaos and laziness, the universe will take that pixel and multiply it by 1 trillion. The result is macro failure, the quantum leap, fractal alteration, and the collapse of size. The thermodynamic transmutation from passive observer to the quantum architect marks the death of the fear of size. The architect assimilates that there is no physical difference between earning $100 or $100 million. The only difference is the number of zeros in the expansion of the fractal. He repudiates the battle against the immense. He understands that the longest lever in the universe is the one that rests on the most microscopic point of his own consciousness. He assumes the execution of holographic sovereignty, fractal alteration, and editing the two-dimensional boundary. This is the ultimate hack. The process to hack the holographic principle requires the architect to become a relentless source code editor at the local level. Imagine the architect facing a monumental challenge. The global economy has entered recession and his industry is collapsing. The survival instinct screams to run in panic to fight the tide. The architect executes the scale lock. He stops the friction. He abandons the contemplation of the mass market. He closes the door of his studio. He knows that the global recession projected on his screen is only a hologram. To change that hologram in his favor, he executes the dictatorship of the base pixel. He reduces his universe of action to the next 5 minutes of existence. He takes the most microscopic and immediate task in front of him, writing a sales structure or doing a push-up, and executes it with a level of order, perfection, and syntropic violence reserved for the gods. He does not do the task to get by. He injects into that small act the same gravitational density and majesty with which he would sign the purchase of a rival corporation. By performing this act of forced symmetry, the architect is overwriting the code of the 2D boundary of his own equation. He has established the monarch pattern in the atom of his day. Next, he initiates the second evolutionary protocol, expansion by self-replication, the avalanche effect. The universe, operating under the unshakable laws of fractal geometry, scans the new source code established in his micro-action. The stochastic matrix detects an absolute level of order, massive syntropy. Since the universe cannot tolerate asymmetries between the encoding plate and the holographic projection, the unified field is forced to apply the fractal multiplier. It takes the relentless perfection the architect put into those 5 minutes and scales it geometrically outward. The code propagates through the field. Suddenly, the external recession ceases to be a threat and reveals itself as the perfect wasteland for the architect's new sales funnel. The individual's internal order acts as a magnetic field that aligns the iron filings of external chaos. Macroeconomic problems are absorbed by the fractal structure of his domination. The architect dominates the world without having fought against the world. He has massacred the giant of external reality simply by sharpening, with psychopathic obsession the smallest needle of his internal discipline. If you are the owner of the square millimeter you step on, the universe delivers the continent, the illusion of complexity, and the single-node solution. To sustain the empire through the ages, the quantum architect must purge his motherboard of another virus, the fetishism of complexity. The inert particle believes that big problems require complex solutions, full of tangled steps and brutal cognitive stress. But in network theory, systems operate by simple rules. An infinitely complex fractal like the Mandelbrot set is generated by the repetition of a brutally simple equation, z is Zn2 Planck-Tullow. When 3D reality becomes chaotic, the architect does not add more chaos. He looks for the single node. He withdraws from the equation. He identifies the base error of calculation. If the company is losing millions and employees are demotivated, the single node might be the lack of lethal consequences for incompetence in the boardroom. The architect does not restructure the entire company. He does not hire consultants. He applies the atomic scalpel to the single node. He fires the incompetent. He corrects the pixel, and he allows the collapse of that wave function to radiate fractally throughout the entire supply chain. Ruthless simplicity applied at the exact turning point alters the global hologram 1,000 times faster than 1,000 hours of complex meetings. One node changes the entire projection. The calibration, the two-dimensional boundary protocol and effort asymmetry. To eradicate the scale illusion from your nervous system and forge the architectural tyranny of a hologram editor, you must install today a regime of dictatorial attention over the smallest unit of your existence. Stop looking at the horizon and start measuring sovereignty by the cleanliness under your boots. The process requires a direct mathematical intervention in your behavior and the execution of the two-dimensional protocol. Step 1. The macro-stress purge, size annihilation. It is biologically forbidden for your amygdala to process size. Erase the adjectives giant or colossal from your language. If you face a debt of $1 million, your nervous system must react with the same stability as if you had lost a penny. In holographic math, they are the same image at different zoom scales. If fear of size paralyzes you, you are falling for an optical illusion. Apply sociopathic indifference to volume. Step 2. The consecration of the base pixel, the monarch protocol. You must establish an absolute asymmetry in your effort, injecting imperial energy into mundane actions. Choose a small action you repeat every day. The passive observer does this on autopilot. You are going to transmute that act. You will execute it with a king's posture, with a lethal speed of attack, and with laser concentration. You turn that microtask into a thermodynamic work of art. By forcing your brain to process absolute excellence in a tiny task, you are hacking your identity. The universe will project that onto the afternoon deal. Step 3. The fractal chaos cut, pruning the static. Audit your immediate environment in a 2-meter radius. If your desk is full of junk or your personal finances are a mess of unclassified receipts, you are emitting a defective source code. Stop large-scale operations. Execute a chaos cut. Order the room. Order. Structure your hard drive. Silence the static of your mind. The quantum architect knows that chaos tolerated on the microscale is a mathematical cancer that will metastasize on the macroscale. Establish the perfect vacuum so that the hologram projected into the outside world is born pure and free of errors. To reclaim your dominion as the source of emission for the universal simulation, you must murder today the exhausted fighter and the strategist of the immense. Renounce the false arrogance of believing you can change the world without first having imposed order over the square centimeter of your own psyche. Next time the ecosystem projects a beast of monstrous proportions on your screen, next time the hologram of the economy seems so immense that it threatens to block your light, stop blinking. Freeze the pulse of your herbivore terror. Smile at the screen. Recognize the giant has no mass, it is just a light trick. Lower your gaze toward the keyboard of your own discipline. Aim your laser at the smallest, most immediate, and painful key of the present moment. When you learn to edit reality by crushing excuses at the nanometric scale of your thoughts, you will cease to be a soldier bleeding in the wars of others' holograms. You will have transmuted, by the unappealable right of the holographic principle into the fractal singularity. You are the architect of the source code who does not need to move mountains, for the entire universe already resides, awaiting orders, on the indivisible and perfect tip of your own index finger. Chapter 9. Zero-point energy, extracting capital from the void. In the holographic simulation we inhabit, the most efficient control algorithm ever designed to maintain biomass in a state of perpetual slavery is the mathematical lie of scarcity. The ordinary individual, that predictable entity we call the inert particle or the passive observer, has been indoctrinated since embryonic assembly. One is taught an economic and thermodynamic premise, the belief that wealth, ideas, and success are finite resources, a closed pie, a zero-sum game. Under the tyranny of this paradigm operates the inert particle, consuming 100% of its ATP in a useless war. Observe the radiography of its competitive agony. The inert particle looks at the market and sees a limited volume of capital. Its primitive brain concludes that for it to win $1, another organism must lose it. To get a slice of the pie, it must snatch it from another particle through brute force, lowering prices, working double hours, or destroying its competition. We shall call this pathology three-dimensional cannibalism. The passive observer lives in constant panic, terrified by inflation or market saturation. He spends his life swimming in what corporate strategists call a red ocean, a thermal bath saturated with blood where millions of organisms tear each other apart for existing crumbs. What this specimen ignores with an astrophysical blindness that condemns it to die of thirst while floating in the middle of the quantum ocean is that wealth is not physical matter. It is a holographic representation of structured information. As long as humans believe capital is earned by moving matter, they remain an exhausted miner. He will live bleeding for limited resources, deaf to the fact that the quantum architect never competes for what already exists. The architect understands that the universe is an infinite generator. True fortune is not snatched from the ecosystem. It is extracted directly in real time and obscene amounts from absolute nothingness. The physics, quantum fluctuations, and the vacuum matrix. To dismantle the blasphemy of resource limitation and awaken to the financial omnipotence of the quantum architect, we must abandon classical economics and descend to the most mathematically precise branch of modern science, quantum electrodynamics, QED. We must understand the anatomy of zero-point energy. In classical Newtonian physics, if you take a box, extract all matter, block all radiation, and cool it to absolute zero, you are left with a perfect vacuum. Absolute nothingness. Zero energy. But quantum mechanics destroyed this illusion. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle also applies to energy, E-daus, and time, T-dau. The equation is expressed with this lethal majesty. Tan delta E and delta T hargie fractad. What this formula dictates is that you cannot know the exact amount of energy in a point of space and at the same time fix an exact moment in time. If you fix time, delta T o $0, the energy uncertainty, delta E $, skyrockets to infinity. This means that the vacuum is not empty. At the subatomic level, nothingness is a boiling cauldron of immeasurable violence. Even at absolute zero, space is saturated with zero-point energy, ZPE. Quantum fluctuations cause pairs of particles and antiparticles to be born from nothing and annihilate each other. These are called virtual particles. The universe borrows energy from the unified field's bank account, creates momentary matter, and returns it before the 3D universe can fine it for violating energy conservation. This is demonstrated technology. In 1948, Hendrik Casimir predicted the effect that bears his name. Casimir predicted that two microscopic metal plates in a vacuum would be pushed together by the pressure of the exterior vacuum. The Casimir effect was measured in 1997. The vacuum exerts physical pressure. It pushes matter. Absolute nothingness contains enough force to move the entire universe. Zero-point energy in the volume of a single coffee cup is theoretically enough to boil all the Earth's oceans. The quantum architect translates this miracle to his financial matrix. He repudiates the idea that resources are scarce. He understands that fiat money, real estate, and physical gold are simply stable, virtual particles. Capital is not matter. Capital is impact energy. Since the unified field contains infinite zero-point energy, the wealth the architect can extract is not limited by the market or his competitors. It is limited only by his consciousness acting as Casimir plates, creating the pressure that forces wealth to materialize. Ex nihilo creation and the falsity of competition. To dominate the extraction of energy from the void, the architect must annihilate the herbivore instinct of competition. The inert particle operates under the transfer model. He opens a coffee shop next to another, competing for the same customers. He is stealing atoms from another organism. It is a beggar's fight in 3D mud. The quantum architect operates under the model of ex nihilo creation. He does not compete. When he enters the unified field through isolation and deep laser concentration, he tunes his neuronal antenna to zero-point energy. From that primordial static, he extracts a disruptive patent or a revolutionary software code. A second before, that asset did not exist in the 3D universe. A second later, the architect has downloaded it from the quantum server. By introducing this new high-value hologram into the economy, the global market is forced to react. To maintain balance, the 3D world must print or redirect capital toward the architect. Matter must match the value of the new structured information he just precipitated. The architect did not steal money. He forced the simulation to generate new wealth to compensate for the gravitational mass of his new idea. He has materialized capital from the void. He is a market creator, not a participant. The quantum leap, the vacuum extractor, and the virtual particle capture. The thermodynamic transmutation from passive observer to the quantum architect marks the end of the hunt for survival and the start of precipitation engineering. The architect assimilates that his mind is not a container of memories, it is a particle accelerator capable of colliding ideas to generate financial mass. He assumes the execution of extractive sovereignty, the configuration of the vacuum extractor, and the capture of the virtual particle. To hack the unified field and convert zero-point energy into dollars or absolute power demands dictatorial coordination between the abstract mind and the physical body. Imagine the architect needing massive capital or to resolve a corporate blockage. The inert particle's instinct would be to call 50 banks or work 30 hours in low-profit tasks. The architect stops the combustion engine. He executes the first extractive protocol, the cognitive Casimir effect, mind pressurization. He knows that virtual particles, multi-million-dollar solutions, are born and die constantly in his subconscious. To capture them, he must create mental Casimir plates. He must limit space. He isolates himself in a white room in hermetic silence. He fixes two implacable restrictive plates in his consciousness. An absurdly massive objective, e.g., generate $10 million in structured value. A suffocating time and resource restriction, e.g., in the next 72 hours, using only what I have in sight. By imposing these two paradoxical restrictions, the architect creates quantum pressure. The rational intellect, seeing the impossibility under the physics of scarcity, collapses and surrenders. In the exact microsecond when 3D logic breaks, the channel of the unified field opens wide. Next, he initiates the second protocol, observation of the Dirac sea. The architect does not think of solutions. Thinking is stirring past junk. He dives into the delta-theta state. He observes the static of the quantum vacuum. There in the darkness, the quantum fluctuations of information begin to materialize. Suddenly, an absurd neuronal connection illuminates his cortex. A merger strategy, a blind market niche, or a software architecture that solves the problem in 3 lines. It is a virtual particle. It is born from absolute nothingness. This is where the passive observer would commit quantum suicide. Having a brilliant idea, the inert gets excited, notes it down, goes to sleep, and promises to start working on it next month. But in Heisenberg's equation, the virtual particle has a microscopic lifespan, delta T dollar. If not observed and anchored to physical mass immediately, it annihilates itself and returns to the void. Therefore, the architect executes the third protocol, kinetic anchoring, giving mass to the particle. In the same fraction of a second, the idea descends. The architect applies brutal mechanical aggression. He does not wait. He rises with the thermodynamic violence of a nuclear reactor. He buys the domain or signs the deal. By executing 3D physical movement, he grants mass and gravity to the virtual particle. He forces the hologram of the idea to collapse into the hard matter of the real world. It can no longer evaporate. He has extracted zero-point energy and crystallized it into a tangible asset through instant execution. The danger of thermodynamic indulgence. The power to extract capital from nothing is the omega level of 3D domain. However, the architect knows that accessing the void requires an immaculate biological baseline. Zero-point energy is an extremely high frequency. A nervous system saturated with junk food and synthetic dopamine is corroded electrical wiring. If you try to channel 1 billion volts of pure creative energy through a rusted cable, the nervous system collapses. You sink into depression or chronic exhaustion. To keep the channel open, the architect treats his body with cold fanaticism. His body is the satellite dish. His tactical fasting is the polishing of synapses. The calibration, the vacuum protocol, and the annihilation of competitive mode. To eradicate the scarcity illusion from your Akashic record, you must install today a regime of total contempt for what the rest of the world is doing. Stop looking at market prices and competitor metrics as limits. They are dead echoes. The process demands the execution of daily Casimir pressure. Step 1. Competitive blindness. Closing the 3D radar. I strictly forbid you from consuming content or spying on competitors. If you look at them, your limbic brain anchors to their frequency. If they lower prices, you panic. Competition is poison. Apply competitive blindness. Delete their names. Convince yourself you are in a league of one. If you look at no one, you have no reference ceiling, and your mind is free to extract info from the highest heavens of the quantum void. Step 2. The Casimir pressure chamber, extraction space. Establish a routine of extracting from nothingness. Once a week, lock your ego in the Casimir chamber. Isolate your body from all electronic devices. Zero stimuli. Write a question designed to generate a quantum crisis in logic, e.g., how do I 10x my profit without new employees? Sit in the immobility of the Sphinx. Suffer the silence until the answer flashes. Step 3. Mass tourniquet. Action before dissipation. When the disruptive idea is born, understand you have a biological time limit before quantum annihilation. Apply the mass tourniquet immediately. Do not leave that state without anchoring the idea to the physical world. Send the email. Register the brand. Perfection is an entropic myth. Geometric density is required. You must force the atoms to recognize a new gravitational force on the board. To reclaim your crown as the ultimate alchemist, murder the corporate beggar and the crumb thief in your circuits today. Renounce the indignity of seat-shoving for mortals. Next time the scarcity illusion tries to squeeze your throat, next time they tell you the market is saturated, freeze the 3D monitor. Laugh with the icy frequency of the primordial void. Close your eyes. Connect your spinal cord to the zero-point energy network. You are the tectonic force. When you learn to repudiate the fight for the finite and manage to extract the empire's blood directly from the black heart of the quantum void, you cease to be a slave. You will have transmuted into the quantum architect, the incandescent entity for whom cosmic fire and eternity spring from his own imagination. Chapter 10. The Singularity, the Final Collapse. At the pinnacle of the unified field's architecture, when the individual has mastered the wave-function collapse, hacked their epigenome, and learned to extract capital from zero-point energy, they face the last, most subtle, and most devastating trap of the ecosystem. This geometric illusion is the prison of duality. We shall call this the orbit complex. Under this perceptive hallucination, the entity we call the inert particle, even in its most advanced and successful version, continues to operate under a fundamental code error. It still believes it is a subject, and the universe is an object. It still believes in separation. Observe the X-ray of its stellar exhaustion. The inert particle has accumulated money, forged an empire, and has power. However, its thermodynamic configuration remains that of a satellite. It lives orbiting around larger celestial bodies. It orbits around global market fluctuations and macroeconomic trends. It orbits around the need to maintain its status against its competitors. Even if it is a giant moon, it remains a moon. In the astrophysics of survival, any object in orbit is subjected to centrifugal and centripetal forces. It is forced to maintain a constant escape velocity, burning enormous amounts of biological and financial ATP. The individual suffers from anxiety at the top because they feel that if they stop pushing or moving, the universe will crush them. They continue chasing success, believing that victory is an external place. This is the orbit complex, the geometric condemnation of always revolving around reality instead of being its immovable center. What this inert particle ignores is that duality is a lie of the three-dimensional front end. The belief that there is a you inside and a universe out there is the last chain of Newtonian physics. As long as humans believe they are separate from the unified field, they will remain an exhausted warrior fighting the cosmos. He will live defending his borders, completely deaf to the unnegotiable fact that the supreme quantum architect has no borders to defend. The architect does not compete against the universe or orbit around money. The architect accumulates such a level of critical mass that the fabric of space-time collapses upon him. The physics, general relativity, space-time fabric, and the singularity. To dismantle the blasphemy of separation and awaken to absolute gravitational tyranny, we must leave the quantum mechanics of individual particles and ascend to the macrostructure of the cosmos dictated by Albert Einstein. We must understand the true nature of gravity, space-time curvature, and the singularity. In 1915, Einstein annihilated Newton's vision. He proved that gravity is not an invisible force pulling on objects. He demonstrated that space and time are fused into a four-dimensional elastic fabric, space-time. Matter tells space-time how to curve, and curved space-time tells matter how to move. This crushing revelation is summarized in Einstein's field equations. G delta psi lambda, G andata efrac, T dataris. In this formulation of icy beauty, the pure geometry of the universe is dictated absolutely by the amount of energy and momentum present. If you place a massive star on this fabric, space-time sinks around it, creating a gravity well. Planets do not orbit because an invisible string pulls them. They orbit because they are perpetually falling down the curved slope the sun has created. But nature has a tolerance limit. What occurs when a star exhausts its fuel? With no fusion reactions pushing outward, the star's immense gravity collapses upon itself. The star implodes. If the mass is large enough, the implosion does not stop. Matter is compressed, crushing atoms, until the entire mass of the original star is concentrated in a volume of 0 dimensions. This mathematical point of infinite density and 0 volume is known as the singularity. The singularity has torn the fabric of space-time. Gravity is so infinitely monstrous that a spherical boundary called the event horizon forms around it. Anything crossing this line must travel faster than light to escape. Everything that crosses the event horizon is sucked toward the singularity in an inevitable, lethal, and definitive way. The black hole does not chase neighboring stars. The black hole sits in the absolute darkness of its own collapse, in perfect thermodynamic silence. It is the ultimate expression of immobility. The quantum architect translates this astrophysical violence to the architecture of his own ego. He repudiates the action of going out to hunt capital or recognition. Hunting is moving, and moving implies having small mass. The architect understands that in the omega stage, the goal is not to move faster than light. The goal is to accumulate so much causal density, structured knowledge, retained capital, automated systems, and icy certainty that his own consciousness implodes, tearing the fabric of the economic simulation around him. He becomes a financial and volitional singularity. He is no longer a market participant. He becomes the market deformation. He curves the space-time of his industry to such an extreme level that money, human talent, and contracts slide irremediably down the slope of his gravity and fall into his event horizon, feeding his mass in an exponential and infinite manner. the spaghettification effect and the destruction of competition. To master the state of singularity, the architect must understand the exact thermodynamic mechanism with which an extreme gravity well annihilates any external threat. In astrophysics, when an object gets too close to a black hole, it experiences a process of gravitational butchery called spaghettification. The tidal forces near the event horizon are so asymmetrical and brutal that the gravity pulling on the front of the object is millions of times stronger than the gravity pulling on the rear. This gradient difference physically stretches the object, tearing it apart at an atomic level, turning it into subatomic spaghetti. The human inert particle faces an aggressive competitor or a macroeconomic crisis and tries to fight it with mental stress. The passive observer crashes against the threat. The quantum architect, the singularity, crashes against nothing. His gravitational density is his shield and his weapon. When a competitor tries to approach the architect's empire to steal market share, or when a crisis tries to destabilize his icy peace, the architect simply allows the threat to cross his event horizon. He offers no linear resistance, but due to the architect's mass and gravity, the crisis experiences spaghettification. The threat is stretched, dismantled, and reduced to elementary data. The architect takes the inertia of the enemy attack, disarms their strategies, and absorbs them into his own accretion disk, using his competitor's kinetic energy to feed his own expansion. Competition is shredded and assimilated as lessons. The quantum leap, the end of duality and total fusion. The final thermodynamic transmutation demands the most beautiful and terrifying act of immolation of the human mind, the death of the separate ego. The human ego needs enemies to feel it exists. It needs external goals to feel it has a purpose. The inert particle needs the noise of the external universe. The quantum architect, reaching the state of singularity, assimilates that there is no outer universe. The equation of quantum mechanics and relativity reveal the final secret. The observer and the observed are exactly the same energy fluctuation in the unified field. He assumes absolute sovereignty. He assumes the collapse of the wave function of the ego. He stops seeing himself as an I attempting to conquer the world. The architect absorbs the entire ecosystem into his own identity. The money not yet in his bank account is not something he lacks. It is his own structured energy waiting to fall in. The allies in his network are terminal extensions of his own nervous system. Macroeconomic crises are temperature adjustments within his own thermodynamic simulator. By eliminating the spatial and conceptual separation between his will and matter, the architect annihilates friction. You are the ocean. If you are the black hole, you cannot fear the darkness. The entire universe becomes his extended body. Operating from this total fusion allows the architect to issue materialization orders without a single molecule of doubt, because he is no longer asking a favor of an external entity called fate. He is simply restructuring the atoms of his own monstrous anatomy. He is the singularity where all lines of probability converge. The calibration, the critical mass protocol, and the eye of the abyss. To eradicate the illusion of separation from your cosmic hard drive and forge the annihilating gravity of a supermassive black hole, you must install an absolute centralization of your energies today. You have to stop trying to embrace the world with your arms and start compressing the world in your chest. The process demands direct astrophysical intervention and the execution of volitional implosion. Step 1. The orbital break, cessation of external propulsion. The first evolutionary step toward material divinity is to stop running. If you are chasing clients or investors, you are a satellite about to crash. Execute the orbital break immediately. Turn off the propulsion engines of the chase. Cut all communication based on need. I strictly forbid you from sending a single message that denotes urgency or scarcity. Stop in empty space. The analog ego will scream in terror, convinced you will starve. Endure that withdrawal panic. Immobility is the first thermodynamic requirement for matter to accumulate and curve space around you. Step 2. Core condensation, increasing causal density. By stopping the external chase, you will find an immense reserve of ATP and cognitive bandwidth. Redirect it inside. You must reach critical mass. Inject massive capital into your own closed systems. Inject hours of structuring into the hard core of your companies. Inject game theory simulations into your intellect. Accumulate physical density by training your organic machine in silence. Become a power hoarder. You are stacking neutron upon neutron in your star's core. You do not seek to shine. Shining is losing energy outward as photons. You seek to darken with so much retained knowledge and power that your mere presence distorts the heart rate of the inert particles around you. You are the heavy center. Step 3. Assimilation of the all. Event horizon deployment. With critical mass reached and space-time curved in your favor, mentally draw your event horizon. You dictate the terms of reality to your environment. These are my contract conditions. This is my profit margin. This is my standard. You do not discuss these terms. Discussing is Newtonian friction. You simply sit at the center of your abyss. If an investor or client crosses your event horizon by accepting your terms, they are devoured and assimilated into your empire. If they stay away, you simply watch them orbit in the distance. Gravity always wins, and eventually all peripheral stars will fall into the inescapable jaws of your unmovable will. To reclaim your absolute throne, you must murder the frightened explorer and the exhausted hunter today. Renounce the false humility of believing you are a small piece of the puzzle. The universe did not build your brain to be a gear. It forged it through 14 billion years of stellar explosions to become the focal lens through which the cosmos orders itself. Next time the 3D world projects the illusion of distance or power, stop the electromagnetic breathing of your heart. Close the interface of your peripheral nerves. Smile in the primordial darkness of the deep void. Recognize that separation is a holographic joke. Look down at the infinite density of your own center of gravity. When you learn to repudiate the hunt for matter in the outside world, you are the master. When you achieve a causal mass so monstrous that the entire galaxy is thermodynamically forced to bend the fabric of reality to pour its treasures into your lap, you will cease to be a passenger in time. You will have transmuted, by the unappealable right of gravitational collapse, into the singularity. You are the Omega Architect, the god of the quantum void for whom no barriers or distances exist. There only exists the silent, terrifying, and perfect banquet of the entire universe, structurally surrendering to the implacable eternity of your own name. Conclusion: phase transition and awakened matter. In classical thermodynamics, a phase transition is not a gradual and predictable adaptation. It is an instantaneous, total, and violent geometric mutation. It is the exact microsecond in which liquid and chaotic water collapses its structure to crystallize into an unbreakable block of ice. It is a fundamental shift in state. By absorbing the source code of this treatise, your central nervous system has just experienced this same astrophysical anomaly. The three-dimensional hologram you once called life has fractured irreversibly. The illusion of solidity has been dismantled. You have eradicated the haze of vibrational schizophrenia. You have annihilated the entropy of your own doubt. You are no longer the inert particle bouncing blindly against the silicon walls of the simulation. You have stopped pleading with matter to grant you a space on its board. You have understood, with the icy and ruthless lucidity of a mathematical god, the true nature of reality. You understand that the external universe is simply a low-resolution monitor. One does not alter the screen by hitting the glass. One rewrites destiny by operating directly from the causal plane, there in the absolute darkness of the quantum void, where probabilities are born before possessing mass. It is the realm of pure potential. By transmuting into the quantum architect, you have become the emitting epicenter. You are no longer a passive receiver of the frequencies of fear, doubt, and scarcity that paralyze the herd. You are the central generator of power frequencies. You know that your unmovable certainty and laser focus are the only fundamental forces. They are the only forces capable of forcing the wave function to collapse in your favor. You have stopped chasing wealth and dominance in the physical world because you have learned to extract them ex nihilo, dictating the laws of the simulation from the gravitational core of your own singularity. You are the architect and the law. The reality you step on today is no longer dead, scarce, or hostile matter. It is awakened matter. It is an ocean of submissive atoms and virtual particles that instantly recognize your electromagnetic signature. Every step you take alters the quantum network. The financial mountains that once seemed immense are now revealed as simple. They are simple fractal expansions of your own internal discipline. You have annihilated the illusion of scale, the suffocation of the how, and the lie of spacetime. Everything you love and everything you demand to dominate is already entangled with you, obeying in real time the rotation of your internal spin. Close this file. Disconnect your interface from theory. The quantum universe is in a state of terrifying expectation, awaiting in absolute silence your next mathematical command. Raise your gaze, assume the heavy and lonely crown of causal omnipotence, and go out to solidify your empire. It is your time to reign. May your mere presence in the hologram be the final collapse, the undeniable proof that matter has no other destiny than to kneel before the majestic tyranny of your own consciousness. The simulation is now your masterpiece. Go and command the atoms.